Chapter 1514. Acquaintances from the Sea Realm. I was once the young lady of the Kaler tribe, my father's only daughter. I had a very loving father and thousands of clansmen as well. I lived in a happy family. But now, my father is gone and all my clansmen are gone as well. All those familiar, smiling faces only exist in my memories now. Kaya sat by the window as she numbly stared outside. 2 streaks of tears ran down her cheeks. The Sea Realm was vast. The number of people living there reached into the tens of billions. However, she did not have a single relative among them. She was filled with loneliness. She gulped down the strong alcohol in her cup, and it roared in her chest like a burning flame, causing her face to flush. She raised her head and stared at the deep blue sky. The sky was both familiar and foreign. Kaya no longer felt any attachments to the Sea Realm now. Perhaps the Sea Realm had become a place of sorrow to her. It would only cause her anguish. At this moment, Kaya overheard the conversation of a few people. Her empty eyes immediately narrowed. There's still one day until the great human expert's wedding. I heard that although Sovereign Jian Chen's wedding was quite sudden, and that the preparations were rather rushed, the wedding will be unprecedentedly grand. That's obvious. Don't you know who Sovereign Jian Chen is? He was born as a human, but his magnanimity and generosity has won the respect of all experts in the world. After all, many saint kings and saint emperors only managed to break through because of Sovereign Jian Chen's heavenly resources. I've even heard that Sovereign Jian Chen helped revive our great sea goddess. Our great goddess will probably personally take part in Sovereign Jian Chen's wedding. I can't speak for our great sea goddess, but I am certain that all the emperors in our sea realm will be going to Sovereign Jian Chen's wedding. There's many saint emperors taking part in his wedding. Just the thought of it is envious. It's said that Sovereign Jian Chen is also the ruler of the Turtle clan. What's interesting is how he's clearly a human, so how can he be the ruler of the Turtle clan as well? This rumor's probably false. I don't know whether Sovereign Jian Chen is the ruler of the Turtle clan, but I paid a visit to the Turtle clan a few months ago and saw a sculpture of him there. With someone bringing up the topic, more and more people took part in the conversation about Jian Chen. Very soon, there were no other conversations in the inn. Basically everyone was talking about Jian Chen. Some people had even began arguing intensely, getting into disagreements over Jian Chen. Kaya, who was temporarily sitting in the same inn, forgot about her sorrow. She listened quietly as everyone conversed about Jian Chen. She could not help but think about when Jian Chen had gifted her the cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor. Although the Kaler tribe suffered its demise because of the cultivation method, Kaya had never blamed Jian Chen. She understood that her clan was devastated because her father mentioned the cultivation method she practiced to his 5 good friends, who he overly trusted. Kaya said nothing. She sat there quietly by herself as she drank, paying attention to all the conversations about Jian Chen in the inn. She had no idea what changes Jian Chen had gone through during these years, nor did she know why he had become the human sovereign. She wanted to learn a bit more about him through the other people. However, after listening for quite some time, she discovered that basically everyone's conversations in the inn revolved around Jian Chen's wedding. Apart from the fact that Jian Chen's wedding was about to occur, she learned nothing else. Kaya knew that she would learn nothing more if she continued listening. As a result, she stood up and clasped her hands to everyone. Warriors! Kaya did not speak loudly, but her voice drowned out all the sounds in the inn. At the same time, her voice was thunderous when others heard it, forcing them to stop talking. At that moment, the busy inn fell completely silent. Everyone looked at Kaya full of dread and fear. They all sensed that the ordinary-looking woman was an extremely powerful expert. Kaya had stunned everyone in the inn with a single word. It would obviously not be a problem for her to learn about what she wanted to know. In order to get on her good side, all the people in the inn hurriedly answered Kaya's questions. Every single person constantly blurted out answers and spoke endlessly. They answered every single question. Kaya learned everything very soon and left behind a few quaking thunders as gifts before leaving. I never thought that warrior Jian Chen would have already surpassed Saint Emperor, and I never thought that so much would happen while I cultivated in the depths of the Sea Realm. such as the invasion of the world of forsaken saints. There's still one more day before warrior Jian Chen's wedding, and I no longer have any attachments to the sea realm, so I might as well go to the Tianyuan continent, Kaya thought. Afterward, she shot off into the sky like a rocket, disappearing in a single moment. At the same time, in a city several million kilometers from where Kaya was, 4 old men walked side by side down a busy street. The 4 old men all wore similar robes, and at a closer glance, it was quite obvious that their appearances and their presences possessed shocking similarities. I never thought that so much would happen while we were in seclusion. Not only have many experts who have surpassed Saint Emperor appeared, but they've even discovered the entrance to a different world, one of the old men said nonchalantly. Big brother, the sea realm is filled with news about the wedding of the greatest human expert, Jian Chen, which will be held in a day, and that the entrance to the other world is on the Tianyuan continent as well. So all the strong people have gathered on the continent. It'll definitely be extremely busy there. Why don't we go to the Tianyuan continent? A second old man suggested. Third brother's right. There's no point for us to remain in the sea realm any longer. At the same time, there's many imperfections in the sword formation we've just comprehended. We can perfect it through fighting and killing. The next time the world of forsaken saints invades will be perfect for the 4 of us to perfect it. Chapter 15:15. A Grand Wedding 1. After making up their minds, the 4 old men no longer hesitated. They immediately left the sea realm and traveled to the Tianyuan continent. If Jian Chen was present, he definitely would have recognized the 4 old men with a single glance. To no surprise, they were Ada, Air, Asen and Aci, who he had met in the divine realm. In the blink of an eye, the day of Jian Chen's marriage arrived. Not only were all the buildings in Flame City well decorated on that day, but they had rolled out a red carpet down every street in the city. Pink petals were scattered upon the ground, giving off a fresh fragrance. On the sides of each main street, red-robed bands beat gongs and sounded drums. They formed a long line, stretching all the way from the entrance of the city to the city center, where the wedding would be formally held. A few guests had already arrived outside the city with gifts. All of them dismounted outside the city and passed through the city gates on foot. Even Saint Emperors did not fly into the city. A large group of female servants stood in an organized formation, waiting at the entrance of the city. As soon as important people arrived, they would personally lead them into the city. Even though there were many Saint Emperors among the guests, all these people entered the city with their gifts by themselves. They were not received by the servants. Strength had nothing to do with whether they could be received by the servants. As a result, it became a great honor for anyone who did receive the guidance of a female servant. Tianmu Ling of the ancient Tianmu clan has arrived. The 3rd prince of the Qinhuang kingdom, Qin Ji, of the 8 great kingdoms has arrived. As the loud calls rang through the city, the male servants welcoming the guests constantly announced the names and identities of a few special guests. The 3rd prince of the Qinhuang kingdom, wearing luxurious robes with golden-threaded borders, entered the city with Tianmu Ling. 2 benevolent old people followed Tianmu Ling. To no surprise, they were Jun Moheo and Wang Yinhong. With Jian Chen's assistance, the 2 of them had broken through to Saint King several years ago and had reached the 7th heavenly layer. They had become the ancestors of the Tianmu clan. Tianmu Ling and Qin Ji were both Jian Chen's friends. Even though their personal strength and backgrounds were nothing in the eyes of Saint Emperors, the 2 of them enjoyed a treatment that even a few Saint Emperors did not have the right to experience in the Flame City. Both of them were invited into the city by female servants who had been prepared beforehand. Brother Jian Chen's wedding sure is grand. So many peak experts have come from everywhere to congratulate him. It's still morning, and I can already vaguely sense the presences of over 20 Saint Emperors. There's still a great group of people who've yet to arrive. It sure does make me envious. If there's someone who's willing to go to such lengths to marry me, I'll agree even if he's weaker than me. Tianmu Ling sighed in surprise as envy filled her face. Qin Ji broke into a laughter when he heard her. Tianmu Ling, when you become the greatest human expert, holding a wedding like this won't be a problem at all. Tianmu Ling pouted and said disdainfully, "If I become the greatest human expert, there'll probably be no one worthy enough to marry aside from brother Jianshen." Qin Ji and Tianmu Ling laughed and conversed as they made their way toward the ceremony. They disappeared into the streets very soon. The 4 imperial protectors of the Qinhuang Kingdom and the king have arrived. The 4 imperial protectors of the Fire Dragon Kingdom and the king have arrived. The ancestor of the Kara clan from the Holy Empire, Kara Lot, has arrived with Kara Liwei. The president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union have arrived. The great elders of the Tyrant's Blade School have arrived. The pavilion master of the Pure Heart Pavilion has arrived. The Elven Queen on the Wasteland Continent has arrived. The Dwarven King of the Wasteland Continent has arrived. The Saint Emperor of the Peng clan from the Beast God Continent, Sangxiong, has arrived. The Hall Masters of the Sea Goddess Hall, Heaven Spirit Hall, and Serpent God Hall have arrived. As the significant people all arrived at Flame City one by one, Flame City immediately experienced the most glorious moment it had ever experienced since it had been founded. Currently, over half of the experts in the world had gathered in Flame City, creating a legend on the Tianyuan continent. Even during the glorious ancient times, there had never been a case where over half of the experts in the world had gathered in a single place. In particular, near the end, when the sea goddess, Tai Ta, Yang Lai, Guihai Dao and Feng Xiaotian arrived, the glory of Flame City reached an unprecedented peak. Very soon the entire city was full. The city was not particularly big, yet it held close to 10 billion people. They filled the streets and alleyways, filling any extra space in the city. The number of people gathered outside the city was several times more than the number in the city. Looking from above, there was an endless sea of heads, stretching toward the horizon. Even though there had not been many people invited to the wedding, since Jian Chen's wedding had been announced publicly, and as the greatest human expert, a countless number of uninvited people would come to congratulate him anyway. Jian Chen did not forget about the people from Longevity Valley either. He got people to set up a space gate in Longevity Valley and invited all of them to his wedding. This was the first time the villagers had ventured into the outside world after spending their entire lives in the valley, so they naturally found everything extremely interesting. As soon as they arrived in the city, they pointed at their surroundings and sighed in wonder. Is this the city founded by Jian Chen on the Tianyuan continent? I never thought it'd be so big. It's much bigger than our village. It's not just bigger than our village. Even if you move the entire valley here, it'll probably take up only a small section of the city. Our village is nothing to it. I never really thought that the city founded by Jian Chen would be so big. I had thought that Flame City would not be any larger than our village. Jian Chen sure is impressive. The villagers from Longevity Valley were all dressed simply. Basically every single one of them wore clothes made from coarse cloth that had been patched several times. As soon as they arrived in the city, they stood out compared to the other luxuriously dressed guests, forming their own unique group. They attracted everyone's attention very quickly. This is weird. It's Sovereign Jian Chen's wedding today, so all those who can set foot in the city are famed people of great importance. Why have a group of country bumpkins suddenly appeared here? And they're all so weak. There's quite a few cripples who haven't even cultivated Saint Force. A woman who had come with her senior frowned at the sight of the villagers. The woman seemed to be 18. She possessed an alluring beauty and radiated nobility. She bore arrogance that seemed to have been groomed since her youth. Shut up. Ronger, don't forget where this place is. This is Flame City, Sovereign Jian Chen's territory. It's not the imperial city in our Felicity Empire. You can never underestimate anyone who can enter this city, no matter how ordinary they are. Understand? A middle-aged man in dragon robes sternly lectured the beauty beside him. The middle-aged man was the new emperor of the Felicity Empire, one of the 3 great empires. Chapter 15-16. A grand wedding too? Yes, father. The woman called Ronger mischievously stuck out her tongue, before replying obediently. However, she still stared at the villagers from Longevity Valley in interest. The new emperor from the Felicity Empire deeply gazed at the group of people from Longevity Valley. He said, "These people seem ordinary and don't have much strength, but they all dare to call Sovereign Jian Chun by his name and show no awe for him. They're even comparing their own village to the city that's known as the greatest in the world. If I've guessed correctly, they definitely have close ties with Sovereign Jian Chun." Oh, the woman beside him opened her mouth in shock, while disbelief flooded her face. At the same time, there were many other people in the surroundings who had also guessed the extraordinary connection of the villagers from Longevity Valley. As a result, even when they brushed past a few Saint Kings or Saint Emperors, they did not underestimate them at all. Even when the young men from the valley widened their eyes and drooled at the alluring beauties in the crowd, the woman with extraordinary origins could only frown. They covered their mouths before turning and leaving the villagers' range of vision. Even the lady called Ronger attracted the attention of a few young men from Longevity Valley. There were several young men around the age of 20 who stared at Ronger's alluring appearance. They could not shift their gazes at all, as if their souls had been sucked away by her. So beautiful. She's basically like a goddess. She's definitely my dream lover. What a beautiful goddess, and she's roughly my age. If I can marry her, I'd be willing to shorten my lifespan by a few decades. Look at her legs. What beautiful and white legs. Those are the prettiest legs I have ever seen. I never thought that the legs of women could be so beautiful. They must feel extremely nice. The young men from Longevity Valley all drooled as they stared at the woman called Ronger. If they were not staring at her face dumbly, they would be staring at her slender jade-white legs. Even their gulps of saliva were audible. The woman called Ronger noticed their wolfish gazes and was immediately covered with goosebumps. She shivered in fear before quickly hiding behind the middle-aged man in dragon robes. Lingering fear covered her face. Only now did she discover just how terrifying the bulky young men in coarse clothes were. They were tempted to eat her up just from their gazes alone. "Ronger, let's go." The man was displeased as well. He pulled the lady with her and left the sight of the villagers. "How did she leave so fast? I didn't even get to see her," one of the young men said in dejection. His gaze remained fixated in the direction Ronger had disappeared, filled with regret and deep infatuation. "She definitely hasn't gone far. Why don't we go after her?" Another young man suggested, burning with desire. "Let's not. Grandpa's told us to not run around randomly. Look at how many people are here, and how big this place is. What if we get lost?" The young men could only give up on catching another glance of the beauty, while full of reluctance. What they did not know was that every single movement they made and word they said was caught by many of the guests in the surroundings. The more powerful guests had reached Saint Emperor, while the weakest ones were Saint Rulers. Even though they spoke in whispers, they were heard loud and clear by the surrounding people. They all shook their heads secretly and thought, "Just where did these annoying young men come from? Young brothers, it's not very polite for you to stare at the legs of us women." An enchanting giggle rang out. When the young men heard the giggle, they immediately felt themselves become powerless. They lacked self-control. Their hearts began to beat uncontrollably. Tian Muling slowly strolled through the crowd with a smile. All her movements possessed an enchanting charm. This charm was useless against the experts in the surroundings, but to the young men from Longevity Valley, it was fatal. So pretty. At that moment, the eyes of the young men widened. They all drooled as they dumbly stared at the beautifully dressed Tian Muling. Tian Muling did not mind their gazes at all. She smiled seductively and giggled. "Little brothers, am I pretty?" "You're pretty." The young men all spoke at the same time. They were all stunned, and their breathing became ragged. Their eyes were so wide that they almost popped out. Tian Muling gently sighed. Some loneliness appeared on her face, and she acted pitiful. She said, "But so what if I'm pretty? There's no one who wants to marry me. There's no one who wants me." "Who said they don't want you? Beautiful girl, why don't you marry me? I want you. Girl, be my five. I swear that I will treat you as only the best for the rest of my life. I will never let you down. There will be meat to eat every day. Girl, my father's the strongest in the village, and he's also an Earth Saint Master. Becoming a Heaven Saint Master for him isn't a problem. You know about Heaven Saint Masters, don't you?" They can fly freely in the sky like birds. If you marry me, I'll definitely plead to have my dad take you flying once he becomes a heaven saint master." When the young men heard what she had said, they all believed that they had caught Tian Muling's eye, except that she was too embarrassed to say so, which was why she had given them a hint. They all attempted to court Tian Muling as best they could, in order to capture Tian Muling's heart. They even brought out everything their family had accumulated. They were even close to mentioning their lineages and their ancestors. Even Tian Muling was stunned by what they said. What they told her had completely overwhelmed her understanding of the world. Any person who courted a woman on the Tianyuan continent would show them what they could offer, through displaying their strength or bringing up their background. However, the young men before her only mentioned that they could cover the basic necessities of life. Tian Muling rubbed her temples. It felt like she had a headache. She realized that she had underestimated them far too much. She needed to evaluate them once again. When did she, a mighty Saint King who could rip open space gates on a whim, need to fly in the sky while being carried by a heaven saint master? Little brothers, if you really want me to marry you, it's not impossible. Once you can beat Jianchen fairly, I'll marry you. Tian Muling giggled. She thought that she could make the young men lose interest in her by saying that, but she darkened instead. She had never thought that she had underestimated these burly young men again. They did not show any negative emotions at all. Instead, their eyes lit up and they seemed pleasantly surprised. Really? If I defeat Jianchen, will you really marry me and become my wife? One of them stared at Tian Muling full of excitement. Anyone could tell that the emotions he showed were genuine and could not be faked. He did not know just how powerful Jianchen was, nor did he know about Jianchen's prestige on the continent. In his mind, Jianchen was friendly and treated every elderly person in the valley full of politeness. He seemed no different than the other people his age. Meanwhile, not only was he the strongest in the village, he was larger than Jianchen as well. As a result, defeating Jianchen did not seem difficult at all. Tian Muling was stunned once again, but she was not the only one this time. Even the guests who watched on in interest became stunned as well. This included Saint Emperors. Soon afterward, they all became stern. They judged the young men seriously and thought, "Are these young men Origin Realm sovereigns who never appear? Can they really defeat Jianchen? Otherwise, how can they be so confident?" Chapter 15-17. A Grand Wedding 3. However, after staring at the young men for quite some time, the people in the crowd failed to find any traces of them concealing their strength. In their eyes, there were even two young men who had not condensed their saint weapons yet. They could not even be counted as fighters, let alone could they defeat Jianchen. Tianmu returned to her senses and stared at the young men with an extremely strange gaze. She giggled. "Brothers, then I will wait for good news from you. I hope you defeat Jianchen soon and take me away." "Don't worry, girl. After Jianchen's wedding, we'll challenge him immediately. I will definitely make you my wife." The same young man who had an Earth Saint Master as a father spoke confidently. Great determination flickered in his eyes. The young men behind him were disappointed. Regret filled their faces. They also had no idea how powerful Jianchen was, but they knew that they could not defeat the young man before them. Not only had he condensed his saint weapon, but he had even become a saint master. Although what happened with the villagers attracted the attention of many, it did not affect Jianchen's wedding in the slightest. In the blink of an eye, noon crept closer and closer. With a loud sound and an uproar across the entire city, Jianchen, Yu Yu, and Huang Wan appeared on a platform that was 6 meters high, all wearing red clothes. Everyone looked, the groom and the brides have all appeared. The groom is Sovereign Jianchen. I've finally seen Sovereign Jianchen in the flesh. I never thought that he'd be even younger than the images. Not only is Sovereign Jianchen powerful, but he's handsome as well. If I can get married to him, or even just become a consort of his, I'd be willing to reduce my lifespan to just 10 years. You want to become Sovereign Jianchen's consort just like this? Why don't you check out the origins of Sovereign Jianchen's brides? One of them is the only direct disciple of Fairy, Hao Yi, while the other is a Saint Emperor. The atmosphere immediately rushed to a new high with the appearance of the groom and brides. Many people stared at the three of them on the platform full of envy. Currently, a woman in a white dress who had her face veiled stood in an inconspicuous corner among the great crowd. She silently stared at Jian Chun and his brides and felt mixed up. She appeared rather depressed. She was the young lady from the Tianqing clan Qin Qin. She had secretly come to Jian Chun's wedding, all by herself. She did not tell anyone she had come. She had even seen Qin Xiao conversing happily with Qin Ji in the crowd, but she did not go up to greet him. She just wanted to stand in a corner by herself and quietly watch Jian Chun's grand wedding come to an end. At the same time, Kaya, Ada, and his brothers had arrived in the city as well. They were several dozen meters away from each other. Kaya had originally been standing in the crowd as she gazed in Jian Chun's direction with mixed emotions. Suddenly, she seemed to sense something. She retracted her gaze and turned her head. Even with all the people blocking her vision, Kaya still managed to see the four brothers several dozen meters away with a single glance. She discovered that the four of them were currently staring back at her in great interest. They looked doubtful and confused. Kaya frowned. She sensed a vague threat coming from the four old men. Their gazes made her uncomfortable as well. A single moment after that, she vanished from their vision. The four brothers stared in the direction Kaya had disappeared in. After a moment of silence, Ada communicated with his brothers through a technique. "Brothers, you also noticed that woman just then. Have you seen her before?" "Big brother, we're always together, so we've seen everyone that you've seen as well. If even you haven't seen her, then we haven't seen her as well," replied Asen. Ada frowned and sank into his thought. He murmured, "This is strange. I've clearly never seen that woman before. So why do I feel an uncontrollable urge to kill as soon as I caught sight of her? As if we have some deep enmity with her. We don't even recognize her." "Brother, so you felt the same. I thought that I was the only one who felt that." "I felt it too. As soon as I approached that woman, killing intent sprouted in my heart for some reason as well. I had almost lost control." "Me too. I felt the same feeling as you." The three other brothers spoke their thoughts. All of them furrowed their brows tightly. The four of them could not understand this no matter how much thought they put into it. No matter how many people were in Flame City, there was no chaos at all. The wedding progressed smoothly. Every single person abided by the rules of the city. After all, today was the wedding of the greatest human expert. No one could afford to cause trouble on such an important day. The day was not going to have good weather. The sky had silently darkened, and the vague sound of thunder could be heard rumbling in the distance. Great gusts of wind gradually appeared in the surroundings, as if a storm was brewing. Jian Chun stood on the platform and clasped his hands at the guests who had come to take part in his wedding. As soon as he made a statement, it began to rain. Jian Chun suddenly raised his head and nonchalantly said, "It's my wedding today, so there must be wonderful weather. How can it rain?" As he said that, Jian Chun waved his hand at the air. Immediately, a resplendent sword chi that several meters long shot into the sky, tearing the clouds that were brewing into a storm into shreds. Immediately, bright sunlight poured down, causing the surroundings to brighten up. However, the temperature in the surroundings suddenly plummeted a few seconds later. Light snow began to suddenly fall from the clear blue sky. The snow had appeared extremely suddenly, without any signs of warning. It was as if the flames were appearing out of nowhere. They obscured the air and painted the sky white. Even the sun in the sky seemed to darken. At the same time, the heat from the sun was unable to melt the snow that had suddenly appeared. Snow in July. A few people cried out around the city. The snow was just far too abnormal. It had actually fallen in the scorching summer heat. Jian Chun noticed the sudden snow as well. He seemed to understand something, causing joy and eagerness to fill his face. Chapter 15:18. A grand wedding for Tai Ta, the sea goddess, Yang Lai, Guihai Dao and Feng Xiaotian, became rather stern as they stared at the flakes of snow in the sky. All the great elders from the protector clans showed odd expressions. They had witnessed something similar several decades ago. so they could not help but connect the falling snow to that event. Is the Arctic ice goddess hall descending? At this moment, many great elders from the protector clans could not help but think the same question. Brother, you're getting married. And you didn't even tell me. Am I still your sister? A voice that Jianchen was familiar with appeared. In the snowy sky, a woman silently appeared. She possessed alluring beauty and wore snow-white clothes. As she hovered in the sky, she seemed like she had fused with all the snow. Sister! Jianchen cried out in joy and amazement. He felt very excited. It was truly a serendipitous moment for him, that Changyang Mingyue could come to his wedding. Tai Ta, the sea goddess, Yang Lai Guihai Dao, and Feng Xiaotian all became fixated on Changyang Mingyue at the same time. Their pupils also narrowed. They were all shocked. This was because they could tell that Changyang Mingyue had surpassed the level of a saint emperor and reached the origin realm. She had even reached late receival. Changyang Mingyue snorted gently and looked at Jianchen with great displeasure. She said, "So much for still recognizing me. I had even thought that you had forgotten about me long ago. You didn't even invited your sister to such an important day. Instead, I have to come uninvited all by myself. However, it's fortunate that I'm not late. I've just made it in time for your formal wedding ceremony." Mingyue. Among the crowd, Yu Fengyan trembled. She finally could not back anymore, loudly calling to her daughter despite where she was. Changyang Mingyue froze. As she gazed at the haggard Yu Fengyan in the crowd, she immediately felt tears well up. Her eyes also reddened slightly before tears began to roll down uncontrollably. She no longer bothered with catching up with Jianchen. She shot toward Yu Fengyan as a blur. She happily hugged Yu Fengyan. Changyang Ba and Bai Yuntian sat on the platform with smiles as they gazed at Changyang Mingyue and Yu Fengyan, who had finally reunited. However, Jianchen's wedding ceremony was being held, so now was not the time to catch up. Even though the two of them had missed Changyang Mingyue as well, they could not help but suppress their feelings. Changyang Mingyue had already reached the origin realm, but she refused to take a seat from the row that had specifically been prepared for origin realm experts. Instead, she remained with Yu Fengyan. Changyang Mingyue's profound ice body had reached completion after emerging from seclusion. She could control the coldness within her at will as well, so there was no need for her and her mother to keep their distance, unlike last time they met outside the Ice Goddess Hall. Yang Lai, your descendants of this generation are really impressive. There's actually 2 origin realm experts, and they haven't even cultivated for a century. Guihai Dao said to Yang Lai with some envy. Yang Lai chuckled aloud. He felt extremely delighted inside as well, feeling joy for having 2 outstanding descendants. That Changyang who has extremely great potential as well. If he goes to the Saints' World and joins our Pure Heart Pavilion, he'll be treated like a treasure by the elders. They'll definitely raise him as a prodigy. He might even be able to enter the pavilion of heaven and earth. Feng Xiaotian sighed in amazement. He could not help but feel admiration for Yang Lai. He had actually gained 3 prodigious descendants from a single generation. Ha 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 ha, Changyang Ba's pretty good, actually pretty good. Once Jianchen's wedding wraps up, I will definitely reward him well. Yang Lai laughed from the bottom of his heart. A lot of the wrinkles on his face seemed to disappear, and he seemed younger. A bow to the heavens and the earth. On the high platform, Uncle Chang sternly hosted the wedding. As he cried out, Jianchen, Huang Wan, and Yu immediately turned to the east and bowed to the world. The city immediately became silent when they bowed. Uncle Chang seemed to have become the only person speaking in the entire city. A bow to the parents. Uncle Chang commanded once again, and Jianchen, Yu and Huang Wan turned. They bowed a second time, bowing to Jianchen's parents, Changyang Ba and Bai Yuntian. Good, good, good. Changyang Ba smiled joyfully as he benevolently gazed at Jianchen and his brides. He felt extremely emotional inside. No one had ever thought that his son's wedding would attract all the experts in the world to congratulate him. Exchanging bows. To the bridal chamber. With Uncle Chang's final sentence, Jianchen, Yu, and Huang Wan left the platform, accompanied by a few female servants. Over the next few days, they would not see anyone else until the wedding ended. The moment Jianchen, Yu Yu, and Huang Wuan vanished from the platform, the veiled Qin Qin in the crowd finally shed a tear. She turned around and was about to leave the city. However, when she turned around, she discovered a boy and a girl standing behind her. The girl seemed to be 11 or 12. She wore white clothes and appeared rather clever and cute. The boy only seemed to be 4 or 5. He was chubby and possessed golden hair, golden eyelashes and golden irises. Even the clothes he wore were golden. He seemed to be made out of gold. Sister, today's a joyous occasion for my brother. Everyone's very happy, so why are you crying? Xiaoling can feel that you're not happy at all. Why? The girl stared at Qin Qin with her large eyes, which revealed her curiosity. She wanted clarification, due to her confusion. Qin Qin was in a horrible mood. She had not planned on responding, but after hearing the naive girl's question, she could not help but reply. She squeezed out a smile and touched the girl's cheek. She gently said, "This is because I feel horrible inside, so I could not help but cry. Little girl, you're still young right now. There are many things you still don't understand. You'll know once you're older, okay?" With that, Qin Qin left the city. The girl nodded, but she did not seem to understand. She remained confused, failing to completely understand what Qin Qin meant. Sister, what does feeling horrible inside mean? Do you have to cry if you feel horrible inside? The boy asked questions because of his confusion and curiosity. About this, you're still young right now. There are many things you still don't understand. You'll know once you're older, okay? Let's go. I'll take you on a stroll elsewhere. As the girl spoke, she left, pulling the boy with her. She moved everywhere in an extremely energetic fashion. The two of them were Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling. Over a decade had passed, but they showed no changes at all. The greatest difference was that Xiao Jin could now speak much more fluently. Chapter 15-19. Reunion with past acquaintances in the blink of an eye. A week had passed since Jian Chun had gotten married. Most of the experts who had been present at the wedding had dispersed, and the city slowly returned to its peaceful days. However, there were a few people who did not choose to leave and instead remained. In the morning, Huang Wuan and Yu Yu assisted Jian Chun in getting dressed with slightly flushed faces. Their eyes were filled with happiness and joy. "You are Waner. I'll take you to see a few of my old friends in a while," smiled Jian Chun. He looked at the two women with gentle eyes. Yu Yu and Huang Wuan nodded with a smile at the same time. They said nothing. In their hearts, Jian Chun was their entirety. In an inn within the city, Kaya was seated at a table, enjoying a delicious breakfast. However, she would frown and show displeasure from time to time. It was quite obvious that she was in a horrible mood. Ada and his 3 brothers were seated at a table beside Kaya. However, the 4 of them did not touch the food in front of them, that was known as the most delicious breakfast food in the city. Instead, they gazed at Kaya and appeared doubtful and confused. The 4 of them had realized that if they were a certain distance away from Kaya, they would feel killing intent from the bottom of their heart. This killing intent was extremely odd. They could not control it, and it would attempt to surge out into the outside world. The 4 of them could not figure out the reason why it appeared. Kaya frowned even more. She could sense that the vague threat from the 4 old men had become even more powerful. If it were not for the fact that Flame City prohibited all fighting, and for the fact that she understood that she was not their opponent, she probably would have begun fighting with them already. Kaya glanced at the tiny beast perched on her shoulder, and immediately became much calmer. She knew that she was not the opponent of the 4 brothers, but with this beast by her side, there were no Saint Kings in the world who could injure her, including Saint Kings at great perfection. On the other hand, the 4 brothers had not become Saint Emperors yet. It truly is a joyous occasion for me to be able to coincidentally see my old friends here. A clear voice materialized from outside the building at this moment. Jian Chun entered the inn, and to no surprise, behind him walked Yu Yu and Huang Wuan. Aside from the 4 brothers and Kaya, there were quite a few other people in the inn. As soon as Jian Chun set foot in the building, all the people, aside from the 5 of them, simultaneously stood up and bowed politely to Jian Chun. The 4 brothers and Kaya saw Jian Chun as well. Unlike all the other people, The 5 of them did not bow to Jianchen. When they saw his familiar face, they could not help but think of everything that had happened since they had met Jianchen in the Sea Realm. Their emotions immediately became mixed. The 4 brothers were affected in particular. When they first came across Jianchen in the Divine Realm, the 4 of them had almost began fighting with him. Back then, even though Jianchen was stronger than them, it was only by a limited amount. However, the changes that Jianchen's identity had undergone made the brothers feel like they were in a dream. They were just about as powerful as Jianchen in the past, but he had already become the sovereign of the humans now, having surpassed Saint Emperor and reached the Origin Realm. Jianchen smiled and returned the people's bow amicably with a clasped fist. Afterward, he made his way to Kaiya's table and sat down. However, his eyes remained fixated on the tiny beast on her shoulder. An odd light filled his eyes. I visited the Kaler tribe in the past, and found that it no longer existed. I originally worried that you had suffered a disaster, but looking at it now, not only did you emerge unscathed, but you even experienced quite a fortuitous encounter. Jianchen stared at Kaiya. He would glance at the tiny beast perched on her shoulder from time to time, and sigh in amazement. He recognized this beast. It was the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast he had seen in the Divine Realm in the past. It was a true divine beast, possessing great future potential. He had originally planned to return to the Divine Realm tame it when he was strong enough. But now, the young divine beast to have been tamed by Kaiya. While Jianchen was staring at the divine beast, it opened its eyes. When it discovered Jianchen, it immediately stood up and began to glow red, orange and yellow. It stared sharply at Jianchen. "Xiaolu, do not be rude." Kaiya gently poked the divine beast, and gave a firm command with a soft voice. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast immediately calmed down. Afterward, Kaiya smiled faintly at Jianchen. "Warrior Jianchen, Xiaolu is still young. Please do not be offended." Jianchen chuckled as he stared at the divine beast. He sighed. "It's been so long, but this little fella still remembers me. Sure is rare." Jianchen gave an explanation when he saw Kaiya's confusion. "I once entered the Divine Realm and came across him. He's a divine beast, called a 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. It's still young right now. Back when I wanted to tame it, I was not powerful enough, so I could only give up on that thought. I'm very curious as to how you tamed it." Kaiya was surprised when she heard him speak. She glanced at the tiny beast on her shoulder and said, "Back when I ran out of choices after being pursued by my enemies, I was forced to take the risk of entering the depths of the Divine Realm. There I met Xiaolu. After it saw me, it followed me out of its own will." "Xiaolu's very obedient as well." "What? The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast followed you out of its own will?" Jianchen was stunned, extremely shocked. He knew that the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was not the kind of divine beast that the people from this world could understand. If a divine beast was taken to the immortals' world, it would only be a regular immortal beast. However, the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was a true divine beast. Its power was beyond the imaginations of the people from this world. Jianchen was extremely confused why a true divine beast would follow Kaiya out of its own will, and obediently listen to her. "Yeah. Is there something wrong? And I've only been able to power up so quickly because of Xiaolu. He gave me some nectar, which was why my strength could skyrocket in such a short amount of time," Kaiya added. Really now? Jianchen came to an understanding. No wonder Kaiya's strength had increased by such a great magnitude in less than 2 decades. She had reached the 8th heavenly layer of Saint Kings from Saint Ruler. Just the thought of accomplishing that within 2 decades was unheard of on the continent. After all, Kaiya did not possess any heavenly resources like the violet cloud peaches that were even invaluable in the immortals' world. However, what surprised Jianchen was that the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast had actually decided to follow Kaiya. He recognized how extraordinary Kaiya was. After all, it was a true divine beast. It would never follow an ordinary person, let alone stick to Kaiya so closely, if she was an ordinary person. Jianchen then looked at the 4 old men. He greeted them and asked about their well-being. Although he did not have any particularly deep ties with the 4 brothers, He had fought alongside them in the divine realm in the past. At the same time, their cultivation method was connected to the nirvanic immortal exalt from the immortal's world, so they were basically the same as him. After all these years, the four brothers had gained strength at an extremely rapid pace as well. They had all become 9th heavenly layer Saint Kings now. Afterward, Jianchen invited Kaya and the four brothers to the city lord's estate as guests. He conversed with them casually before bringing up the world of forsaken saints. The 5 of them only possessed a limited understanding of the foreign world. Jianchen naturally hid nothing and told them everything he knew. Once they learned about the foreign world's true strength, all of them became extremely stern. I never thought that the world of forsaken saints would actually possess such a terrifying strength. Just the number of saint emperors they have is astounding. It'll basically be a battlefield for saint emperors. Saint kings will be doomed if they take part in the battle. It's a joke that the 4 of us wanted to use the blood of the foreign experts to demonstrate the power of our sword formations, Ada said with a sunken face. But he felt no fear at all. Brother, if we're separated, we'd indeed be doomed against saint emperors. But if we formed our sword formations, we can kill saint emperors, Air said confidently and enthusiastically. That's right. We've just forged our flying swords, so our battle prowess has soared. Coupled with the sword formation we've just comprehended, we should be able to handle any saint emperors, as long as we face a maximum of 3 at a time. Asen stood up, burning with enthusiasm. Chapter 1520. Gifts of Immortal Peaches. Jianchen's interest was piqued when he heard them mention flying swords. He asked, "Can I see the flying swords you forged?" When Jianchen had first met the 4 brothers in the depths of the divine realm, he had discovered that the weapons they were using were rather similar to his azulate swords. They had been forged, unlike all the saint weapons used by the fighters on the Tianyuan continent, which were condensed from saint weapon. It was not that weapons made from various materials were non-existent on the Tianyuan continent, but they were basically tools for farming, or used by people who had not condensed their saint weapons, yet as temporary weapons. They would never be used by people who had already condensed their saint weapons. The 4 brothers were the few people among all the experts Jianchen had met who used weapons like these. The 4 brothers did not hesitate at all. They drew their metal swords. They all stuck out their right palms, and a finger-sized sword appeared out of nowhere, hovering an inch above their palms. The toothpick-like swords rapidly expanded, becoming full-sized 1.3-meter-long swords. Jianchen's eyes began to shine as he stared at the brothers' swords. He could feel pulses of powerful sword chi emanating from the swords. Although the weapons appeared the same as when he had first seen them in the divine realm, the presences they gave off were completely different. The 4 brothers had definitely refined the swords again, making their power increase. At the same time, Jianchen could see a vague glimpse of the nirvanic sword immortal's 4 swords in the weapons. The 4 swords were vaguely similar to the sword of mortality, sword of reincarnation, the sword of slaughter, and the sword of severance. They were only simple signs right now, less than 1/10 of their original appearance. They're becoming more and more like the azulate swords, Jianchen thought. They did not have similar appearances, but they were of a similar quality and followed a similar method of cultivation. He could see other practitioners of the sword aside from the Spirit King through the 4 swords. The Spirit King's sword was not condensed from energy either. It was similar to the azulate swords and the 4 swords from the brothers. They were all forged. Do you know the nirvanic immortal exalt? Jianchen stared at the 4 old men with mixed emotions. He knew that he and the old men were similar. They had obtained legacies from the immortal's world, and as long as they were still alive in the future, they would return to the immortal's world. At the same time, Jianchen understood that he could become enemies with anyone in this world, but the 4 brothers. He had received the partial legacy of the former master of the azulate swords, while the old men had received the partial legacy of the nirvanic immortal exalt. The former master of the azulate swords was one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortal's world, just like the nirvanic immortal exalt. They were the only 2 sword gods in the immortal's world, and had possessed close ties. We know the Nirvanic sword formation, but not anything about some Nirvanic immortal exalt, answered Ada. Jianshan gently sighed. The four of them had inherited a portion of the Nirvanic immortal exalt's legacy, but they did not know who the legacy came from. Jianshan felt anguish for the Nirvanic immortal exalt. However, he did not plan on telling the four of them about the Nirvanic immortal exalt. He would tell them about the matters of the immortals' world after they entered the saints' world. In the end, Jianshan left Flame City with the four brothers and Kaya. They entered the abandoned mines of tungsten alloy nearby and stopped in the deepest parts of the mountain valley. With a flip of his hand, he gifted the five of them 5 5th-grade violet cloud peaches. He then personally used the water of highest quality from the springs of life to make comprehension tea from 5 5th-grade leaves. He said, "The violet cloud peach can assist you in breaking through to Saint Emperor. Once I make the tea, consummate with the peach." Jianshan was not stingy at all toward the four brothers and Kaya, directly using the best peaches and tea he had on hand. Although he seemed rather unaffected on the surface, his heart ached inside. There were only 25-grade violet cloud peaches, as well as some others composed of the 4th grade and below. He was only left with 18 5th-grade comprehension tea leaves as well. A while later, Jianshan finished brewing the tea. He split it into 5 portions and distributed it among Kaya and the 4 old men. The 5 of them consumed the tea with the peach just as Jianshan had requested. As soon as the peaches reached their stomachs, it transformed into tremendous energy, which filled their bodies. The energy rapidly increased as the peach was digested. If the energy had not been extremely gentle, the 5 of them would not have been able to endure it. Their faces all changed slightly, but without any hesitation, they immediately sat down and began cultivating by absorbing the energy. Jianshan did not leave. Instead, he sat down opposite of them to watch over them. However, Jianshan soon opened his eyes. He stared at the 5 of them, brimming with interest. Surprise filled his eyes. He had given the peaches to many people in the past, but none of them had been able to completely absorb all the energy aside from himself. Over half of it would leak out of their bodies and disperse into the surroundings. However, the 5 of them did not let any energy leak out after consuming the peaches. Are they the same as me, able to absorb all the energy from the peaches and not waste any at all? Jianshan thought. He felt rather taken away. He could absorb the peach completely because he cultivated the chaotic body. Just what were the 5 of them using to absorb all the energy from the peaches? At this moment, Jianshan heard a buzz. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast, which had been snoozing on Kaya's shoulder, had appeared before him with its buzzing wings. It pleaded with Jianshan, as if it was trying to get on his good side. Thirst filled its eyes. Jianshan broke into laughter when he saw how the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was behaving. He said, "You little bastard. You were hostile toward me in the inn earlier, yet you're begging me for something now." Jianshan shook his head as he smiled. He pulled out a 5th-grade violet cloud peach from his space ring and tossed it to the divine beast. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was a true divine beast. It could fully absorb the energy from a 5th-grade violet cloud peach, so Jianshan was not worried at all. And now that the battle against the foreign world was drawing closer, Jianshan also wished to increase the divine beast's strength. That way, one additional existence with power would be on the side of the Tianyuan continent. He believed that no one was the divine beast's opponent when on the same level of cultivation, unless that person was a prodigy from a large sect or clan from a higher world. Chapter 1521. Extraordinary. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast's eyes immediately lit up when it saw the violet cloud peach. It was filled with joy and buzzed happily. It immediately flew before Jianshan and used its 2 front legs to accept the peach, which was about the same size as itself. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast did not consume the peach immediately. It first sniffed the peach's faint fragrance and seemed to become drunk. Its body then began to expand at a visible rate, becoming a meter long in the blink of an eye. Although it was a soaring ant, the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was extremely different from regular ants. It looked similar, But at a closer glance, it possessed many minute features that soaring ants did not possess. At the same time, it vaguely glowed with red, orange, and yellow hues. The divine beast opened its mouth and sucked the violet cloud peach away, before returning to the size of a fist. It sneakily glanced at Jian Chun, before laying near him to absorb the energy from the peach. A day later, the four brothers all broke through to Saint Emperor. They radiated with tremendous presences, which enveloped the entire mountain range, but they remained in a state of cultivation. They had not completely absorbed the energy from their peaches yet. The four of them continued to cultivate. Their strength seemed to be increasing with every passing moment. However, no rainbow clouds appeared after they breaking through to the realm of Saint Emperor, so their breakthroughs seemed extremely simple, vastly different when compared to anyone else's breakthrough. Jianchen was not surprised at all. He had anticipated this. He then glanced at Kaya. Kaya had reached the great perfection of Saint King now, and was about to break through to Saint Emperor. 2 hours later, Kaya successfully broke through to Saint Emperor as well. However, the moment she broke through, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. He looked up and saw the blue sky rapidly replaced by 9 colored rainbow clouds, which spanned the entire continent. The rainbow clouds completely covered the continent, and were visible from any point on the continent. The appearance of 9 colored rainbow clouds used to shake the entire continent, causing all the apex experts to gather as soon as possible. However, no one came to see who had broken through now. This was because all the territories in the world had received Jian Chen's blessing. The world no longer lacked Saint Emperors. Every single race had a few dozen at the very least. Both Kaya and the four brothers did not waste a single speck of energy in the immortal peaches, just like Jian Chen. They had completely absorbed every last drop, and breaking through to Saint Emperor had only taken up 1/10 of what was available in the peach. Jian Chen assumed that the 5 of them would need at least a few more days before they could completely absorb the energy in the peaches. However, to his surprise, Kaya roused the next day after breaking through. She had completely absorbed all the energy and wasted none of it. What Jian Chen could not understand was that Kaya was still a first heavenly layer Saint Emperor. Her strength had not increased at all after she reached Saint Emperor. On the other hand, the four brothers had reached the 3rd heavenly layer, and were still filled with energy from the immortal peaches. Kaya opened her eyes and also showed doubt. She murmured, "Odd. The remaining 90% of energy in my body all surged into my soul after I broke through. It's vanished." A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes when he saw that. He gazed at Kaya deeply before sinking into his thoughts. Kaya did not understand why such a strange thing had happened either. She stood up and arrived beside Jian Chen, thanking him. "Warrior Jian Chen, I'm unable to return all the favors you've given me. I will forever remember them, and if I have the power in the future, I will definitely return all of them 1,000-fold." Jian Chen frowned when he heard her promise. He looked at Kaya and said unhappily, "Kaya, I've treated you as a friend. You say this like I'm just a passerby." Kaya smiled apologetically before sternly replying, "Warrior Jian Chen, you are my best friend." As she said that, Kaya's heart ached, and she felt rather lonely. She no longer had any close people in the world after the Kaler tribe had been wiped out. She did not even have any friends. She had rarely made friends back in the Kaler tribe. Jian Chen had become her only friend now. Jian Chen could sense Kaya's faint sorrow. He sighed inside and said, "Kaya, why don't you stay in Flame City in the future?" Kaya hesitated for a while before nodding to agree with Jian Chen's suggestion. "Warrior Jian Chen, I'll return to the city first. It's very uncomfortable for me to stay near the 4 of them." Jian Chen nodded. He did not plan on returning to Flame City yet. He wanted to watch over the 4 brothers and prevent any accidents from happening. Kaya picked up the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast, who was curled up on the ground, and left, returning to the city by herself. Jian Chen remained where he was and watched the 4 brothers until they finally roused after a few days. They had completely absorbed the energy in the immortal peaches and had reached the peak of Saint Emperor. They had reached the 9th heavenly layer, becoming the strongest beneath the origin realm aside from Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Gui Hai Dao. With our current strength, we may not be able to kill Origin Realm experts with our sword formations, but keeping them busy won't be difficult at all, Ada murmured. The four of them were filled with joy due to their increase in strength. Their strength filled them with confidence. Now the four of them were powerful enough to take part in the battle against the foreign world. Jianchen first congratulated the four of them. He then paused before continuing. Kaya is my friend. Ada Asen and ACI. I hope you don't become enemies with her. We have no disagreements with Kaya at all, so why would we become enemies with her? At the same time, the threat of the foreign world is so great. During such a sensitive time, we'll even disregard any irreconcilable amenities in order to gather strength to deal with any future invasions, said Ada. Chapter 1522. They're finally here. The four brothers were just like Kaya. They did not choose to leave, and instead stayed behind in the city, waiting for the invasion. Although both the fame and power of the current Flame City had far surpassed the 7 capital cities on the continent, its size was insignificant compared to the other capital cities. It was not even a tenth of the other cities' size, so the four brothers and Kaya would run into each other. The four brothers and Kaya had no disagreements. They had also received Jianchen's warning and knew that they could not fall out with Kaya no matter what. However, whenever they saw her, they would feel a powerful killing intent rise up within them, almost to the point where they would lose control. The four brothers thought about why this killing intent appeared, but they did not reach a conclusion no matter what. As a result, the four of them tried to maintain their distance and attempted to avoid all forms of contact with Kaya while they stayed in Flame City. At the same time, Kaya knew that the four brothers were familiar with Jianchen, so she remained away from them. At the same time, the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast by her side had successfully broken through and reached the 9th class as well. So even though she was far weaker than the four of them, she did not fear them, even though she was a 1st Heavenly Layer Saint Emperor against 4 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Emperors. Kaya was very confident that even though the four of them had become peak Saint Emperors, which was even slightly greater than the cultivation level of her 7-colored heaven-devouring beast, they would not be able to defeat the divine beast if they really did start fighting. Flame City peacefully settled down, and the continent gradually returned to peace as well. The weaker fighters continued their lives while the powerful experts nervously prepared for battle. Jianchen did not disclose the strength of the world of Forsaken Saints to everyone, in order to prevent the entire continent from panicking. Only those who had the power to take part in the battle knew more. As a result, the weaker people on the continent all believed that their world had once been threatened by the world of Forsaken Saints, but believed that they were not undefeatable, because not only did their world now possess many Saint Emperors, there were several sovereigns who had surpassed Saint Emperor. The current world was no weaker than the ancient times in terms of strength. On the 7th day after Jianchen's wedding, Jianchen's uncle, Bai Dao, who had been missing for many years, suddenly returned. He appeared in Flame City. Bai Dao had obtained Venerable Poison Sword's fortune in the past, inheriting his cultivation method and his comprehension of the mysteries of the world. Bai Dao had spent the past few years all by himself, hidden away in a remote region, as he cultivated in seclusion. He paid no heed to the matters outside. He had only completed his cultivation recently, inheriting everything the Venerable Poison Sword knew, which was why he had emerged. Bai Yuntian was most delighted by Bai Dao's return. Tears streaked down her cheeks out of joy. The two siblings had fled from the ruins of the Bai family in the great battle long ago, relying on each other, while traveling far away from their homeland. They experienced countless setbacks before finally settling in the Jessen Kingdom. It had not been easy for them at all, but they were consoled by each other because of their permanent bond as siblings. Bai Hai emerged from seclusion as well. When he saw Bai Yuntian and Bai Dao, his emotions became extremely mixed. The Bai family had been extremely glorious in the past. Although it had not been an apex clan, it had still possessed the power of a hermit clan. They had been prosperous and had reigned supreme in a given region. Now the great clan had been reduced to Bai Yuntian and Bai Dao. Afterward, Bai Dao gradually understood everything that had happened on the Tianyuan continent while he had been in seclusion. He immediately gasped in amazement when he learned about his nephew's glorious achievements. Everything felt like a dream to him, simply unrealistic. Jianchen had already assisted his uncle in breaking through with the heavenly resources from the Xianhuang microcosm in the past, successfully making him a saint emperor. So Jianchen could not offer him any more violet cloud peaches, since they could only be consumed once every century. Yu Yu and Huang Luan entered seclusion once again. The two of them had received gifts from Changyang Mingyue, two thumb-sized 10,000-year-old ice souls. Changyang Mingyue had secretly hid them from Protector Shui when she had been cultivating, and had now gifted them to her sister-in-laws. Jianchen remained in Flame City for a few days before bidding farewell to everyone else. He ventured to Three Saint Island all by himself. He landed on the island. Shangguan Mu'er had returned from the continent long ago, but Jianchen had no idea whether Shangguan Mu'er had sorted out her relationship with Hao Wu and Zhar Kaiyan since he had left them. However, he could clearly sense some minute changes to Shangguan Mu'er. The changes seemed to be emotionally positive. What surprised Jianchen was that he could vaguely sense that her strength had increased once again. Jianchen settled on Three Saint Island. He lived life of leisure, living like the fishermen on the island on certain days. He would row a boat out to sea to go fishing, when he was not spending time guiding Xiao Bao through his cultivation, or increasing his battle experience. Jianchen planned on staying with Xiao Bao and Shangguan Mu'er until the battle against the foreign world. There was nothing left for him to attend to on the Tianyuan continent. Everything was managed by Yang Lai, Guihai Dao, and Feng Xiaotian. The three of them had lived a very long time. Aside from strength, their combined experiences outmatched Jianchen's experiences in all aspects. In the blink of an eye, Jianchen had spent 3 months on Three Saint Island. Those 3 months were the easiest, most relaxing, and happiest days since he had been reborn on the Tianyuan continent. There was no scheming, no near-death battles, so there was no need for him to work hard just to live and remain on guard at all times. Jianchen also refined the shards of comprehension he had gained from the Anata Tower. He benefited greatly, and his way of the sword had progressed to partial achievement. His cultivation did not increase, but his strength increased dramatically. Jianchen had also refined the azulate swords, so that they became his fated swords. He could store them within his dantian. However, since the sword spirits were still weak, and needed to absorb the supreme yin force and supreme yang force to slowly recover, Jianchen kept them on his back. Amid the dark, bottomless pit in the ruins of Mercenary City, their space violently shook. It was extremely unstable, and streams of energy would surge out from time to time, shooting into the sky before disappearing into outer space. This was the tunnel between the Tianyuan continent and the world of Forsaken Saints. However, at this very moment, the rippling space suddenly seemed to become more violent. The violent streams of energy would surge out from time to time, and deep within the tunnel, a few blurry figures were vaguely visible, rapidly moving closer to the entrance. At the same time, Jianchen suddenly opened his eyes while sitting at the top of Three Saint Island. His ordinary gaze became extremely sharp at that moment, like two unsheathed swords. He gazed in the direction of the Tianyuan continent. They're finally here. Chapter 1523. Prepared for battle. Shangguan Mu'er silently appeared by Jianchen's side. Her purple dress and hair fluttered in the wind. Her beauty did not seem to originate from this world. Instead, she seemed like a goddess from heaven. She stood with her zither in her arms, sternly staring in the direction of the Tianjian continent with cold eyes. At the same time, Taita sat on the only throne in the War God Hall, on the wasteland continent. He radiated a faint golden luster, which entwined with the light that came from the divine hall. Taita seemed to have fused with the structure. Taita was not the only person in the War God Hall. Over 30 other 100 races experts sat before him cultivating. They unintentionally unleashed powerful presences. They were all Saint Emperors. After over a decade, more people from the 100 races had broken through to become Saint Emperors. At this moment, Tai Ta's face twitched while he sat on the throne. He slowly opened his eyes, and they became fixated on the Tianyuan continent. His eyes seemed to be able to pierce space, viewing Mercenary City from countless kilometers away. He could clearly see what was happening in the tunnel. Tai Ta stood up from the throne and said with a stern voice, "The people of the foreign world have come. Everyone, follow me to the Tianyuan continent. We must prevent the foreigners from setting foot in our world." Tai Ta's voice reverberated beyond the War God Hall. It expanded across the entire wasteland continent as a visible sound wave. In just a few seconds, Tai Ta's voice had resonated across the entire continent. The Saint Emperors in the War God Hall all stood up simultaneously. Without any hesitation, they immediately left the continent through a space gate. At the same time, many space gates formed across the continent. They were all created by Saint Kings, and many Saint Rulers were waiting near each one. When they heard Tai Ta's voice, all those who were Saint Ruler or beyond hurried off to the Tianyuan continent through space gates. On a desolate mountain in the Sea Realm, a hazy figure obscured by a layer of blue light sat on a boulder. Suddenly, the hazy figure opened her eyes, producing 2 rays of light which disappeared into the space before her. The light caused the space in front of her to tremble. Just her gaze was powerful enough to harm, or even kill someone. The world of Forsaken Saints is attacking. All the experts of the 3 territories immediately head to the Tianyuan continent, the hazy woman gently commanded. Although she was extremely far away from the 3 halls, her dignified voice reached the 3 of them at the same time. All the experts in the Sea Realm had gathered in the 3 halls. The moment the woman's voice materialized, the 3 hall masters gave commands, leading all the experts to the Tianyuan continent. Although the Sea Realm was several tens of million kilometers away from the Tianyuan continent, it was only a single step away with the use of space gates. A white-clothed girl was leading a golden-clothed boy, who only seemed to be 3 or 4 years old, through the streets of Lore City. They looked around as they moved, interested in everything. "Sister Xiaoling, is this where Big Brother grew up? But why doesn't it seem any better than Flame City?" the boy asked. When Xiaoling was about to respond, her facial expression suddenly changed. She glanced in the direction of Mercenary City, and surprise was plastered across her face. She became flustered as she urgently said, oh no, those baddies have come again. Brother Xiaojin, let's go to Mercenary City. We have to stop them." Xiaojin gazed in the direction of Mercenary City as well, and gave a serious nod. His gaze sharpened at that moment, now filled with battle intent. He showed no fear at all. Xiaojin and Xiaoling silently disappeared from Lore City a moment later. Yang Lai, Guihai Yidao, and Feng Xiaotian sensed the arrival of the experts from the foreign world as well. They lead the experts of the 4 races, who had been practicing formations, through a space gate to Mercenary City. Sang Shuang received Jian Chen's message on the Beast God continent. With his command, people immediately flickered out of the Beast God Hall. All the experts there had emerged from seclusion, leaving through space gates with all the magical beasts who were class 7 or above. Rum Guinness watched the experts of the Beast God Hall leave from the 98th floor. Her face was filled with worry. She did not head to the Tianyuan continent with Sangxiong. She wanted to remain behind, by her child's side until he completely inherited the Beast God's legacy. Jian Chen Shengguan Mu'er, the Sea Goddess, Tai Ta, Xiaojin, Xiaoling Guihai Dao Feng Xiaotian, and Yang Lai hovered above the ruins of Mercenary City. They all sternly stared at the gaping, bottomless hole beneath them. The tunnel hidden below would spew out streams of violent energy from time to time, causing the space in a radius of several hundred kilometers to become very unstable. Some of the streams would even rush into the air, and then into outer space. Some of the streams would approach the group of people who hovered in the air as well, but they would either be dodged or conveniently dispersed as soon as they got close to them. Several hundred space gates had formed several hundred kilometers away, where the space was stable. Each space gate was several hundred meters away from each other, as large numbers of experts poured out. In just a short moment, several tens of thousands of people gathered in the stable space. The weakest people present were Saint Rulers. The tunnel began to gently tremble. A few blurry figures were vaguely visible from the Tianyuan continent. They were getting closer and closer to the exit of the tunnel. Move into the myriad armament formation, Feng Xiaotian commanded, and with a wave of his arm, the remaining ancestral weapons from the protector clans appeared out of nowhere. Although they all varied in appearance, all of them were 100 meters long. Soon afterward, 49 Saint Emperors stepped forward from the 4 races. They formed 7 groups, and each group stood before one of the ancestral weapons and controlled the weapon in front of them, creating a huge killing formation. Chapter 1524. The might of Saint Artifacts. Feng Xiaotian stared at the 49 Saint Emperors, who were controlling the 7 ancestral weapons. He gently sighed. The myriad armament formation requires 10,000 Saint Artifacts to create a formation. Only then will its might be fully displayed. But it's a pity that we only have 7 Saint Artifacts here. Getting 49 Saint Emperors to wield them will only allow them display, at most, 1/10,000th its usual strength. It should be enough to keep 7 receival experts busy, or 1 returnance expert trapped. Feng Xiaotian gave another command. Immediately, over half of the experts from the 4 races began to cast formations. Every single one of them was prepared for battle, ready to face the armies of the foreign world in their strongest condition. The 7 ancestral weapons rapidly descended from the sky, under the control of the 49 Saint Emperors. Each one of them brightly glowed as a terrifying energy roared from them like the sea, radiating from the weapons and permeating the surroundings. The energy formed a tremendous pressure, forcefully pushing back the violent streams of energy emitted by the tunnel. The myriad armament formation blocked the entrance of the tunnel. The 49 Saint Emperors bellowed out a command, and the energy within them surged into the 7 ancestral weapons, immediately causing them to shine even brighter. At that moment, the 7 weapons seemed to have awakened from an eternal slumber. They were no weaker than Origin Realm experts. They all struck at the tunnel simultaneously. Under the attack, the surrounding space descended into pure darkness. The attack from the 7 weapons was just far too powerful. They had surpassed the limits of space there, causing the tunnel to collapse. Even though the space there had shattered and collapsed, the broken space was not enough to affect the 7 ancestral weapons, or the 49 Saint Emperors. 7 terrifying strands of energy shot into the tunnel with destructive presences, breaking through the violent streams of energy in the tunnel, and shooting toward the experts who were drawing closer to the continent. The experts of the world of Forsaken Saints were led by a group of Saint Emperors. Facing attacks that were no weaker than receival experts, they were unable to protect themselves. These attacks would be difficult to withstand even if they all worked together. Not to mention the fact that the 7 strands of energy moved extremely quick. They did not even have the time to gather many people together. In a hurry, the Saint Emperors at the very front could only pool their energies together to form a powerful barrier before the attacks arrived. Saint Emperors were puny before the 7 ancestral weapons that were no weaker than receival experts. The ones at the front were unable to resist. Their bodies crumpled like paper while their souls were wiped out. The attack from the 7 ancestral weapons did not weaken at all after tearing through several Saint Emperors. They continued into the depths of the tunnel, mercilessly wiping out Saint Emperors. The stable tunnel began to tremble slightly due to the attack. In the depths of the tunnel, there was a mess of flesh and blood. Over 20 Saint Emperors from the foreign world had been slain. Even their souls had failed to escape. Even though the difference between a receival expert and a Saint Emperor expert was only a single realm of cultivation, in fact, just a single step away for peak Saint Emperors, this single step was as wide as a chasm. It required a whole different type of change. Among the 3 cultivation realms of Saint Ruler, Saint King and Saint Emperor, the differences were extremely great, but they still all belonged to sainthood. They were in one major cultivation realm. However, the Origin realm was a higher realm of cultivation. Those at the Origin realm did not use Saint Force from sainthood but Origin energy. Those below Saint Ruler were ants. Before a Saint Ruler, Even a sixth-cycle Heaven Saint Master was as puny as an ant. At the same time, it could be said that those beneath Origin Realm were ants. Even those at the peak of Saint Emperor were puny. The distance between the major realms of cultivation could not be countered by ordinary people. However, each group of 7 Saint Emperor controlling a saint artifact had fully displayed the power of the weapon due to the formation. They were equivalent to 7 Receival experts. If they worked together, they would have been able to take on a Returnance expert in battle. As a result, just a single attack from them was enough to slay over 20 Saint Emperors. There were many Saint Emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints. Just the number that had entered the tunnel reached into the several hundreds. So slaying 20 Saint Emperors was not even a tenth of them. They were still unable to avoid being obstructed by the Saint weapons. However, the other Saint Emperors in the tunnel were prepared now. They formed defensive formations, supported by several or around a dozen people. They formed a profound diagram, which blocked the attacks like a shield. At the same time, the 49 Saint Emperors on the Tianyuan continent's side sent a second wave of attacks. Tremendous energy formed 7 resplendent pillars, which shot into the tunnel. Boom! When the 7 pillars of terrifying energy collided with the defensive formation that had been created by the foreign Saint Emperors, the formations immediately collapsed. They were unable to hold the attacks back at all. After tearing through the formations, the 7 streams of energy enveloped over a dozen Saint Emperors, and with a boom, they were all torn to shreds. Corpses did not remain when the attacks, which were at the level of an Origin Realm expert, hit the Saint Emperors, because the energy was just far too terrifying, enough to destroy the surroundings. Even the extremely tough tunnel began to gently shake. The second attack from the Myriad Armament formation was followed up by a third. They wanted to kill off as many experts from World of Forsaken Saints' main force as possible before they could arrive. But at this very moment, the tunnel began to violently tremble. A terrifying pressure far greater than the level of a Receival expert exploded forth from the depths of the tunnel. Even the sun, moon, and stars seemed to be overshadowed by the pressure. At the same time, the violent streams of energy in the tunnel became gentle, rapidly dissipating into nothing. The streams of energy were unable to exist before the indescribably powerful pressure. They had been forcefully dispersed by it. Chapter 1525. Xiongzhong of the Returnance Realm. A huge hand rapidly expanded as a tremendous pressure was unleashed in the depths of the tunnel. The hand flew over the heads of the Saint Emperors and grabbed the powerful attacks that had come from the ancestral weapons. The hand was condensed from energy and gave off a pressure that filled the tunnel. Wherever the hand passed, the tunnel would tremble violently. The hand was just far too terrifying. It had exceeded a Receival expert in terms of strength, causing the tunnel to react. It was approaching the limits of what the tunnel could bear. As soon as the 7 attacks at the level of a Receival expert came in contact with the huge hand, they dispersed. The hand had slightly dulled, but it did not slow down at all. It continued toward the entrance of the Tianyuan continent, headed toward the 49 Saint Emperors. The Saint Emperors revealed drastically different expressions. They knew that this opponent was beyond what they could handle, so without any hesitation, they retreated as quickly as they could. If it were not for the fact that the hand had to move through the tunnel, which slowed it, then they would not have been able to avoid the attack with their strength. The most powerful experts on the Tianyuan continent narrowed their eyes as the hand reached the exit of the tunnel. The next moment, there was a flash of resplendent violet light, coupled with a gentle thrum of the sword. The Ziying sword on Jian Chen's back shot into the tunnel. It approached the great hand with a seemingly unstoppable motion. The energy hand seemed to understand the power of the Ziying sword. It suddenly began to shrink, turning into a finger that was only a meter long. Even though it was much smaller now, the energy in it was much more condensed. In the end, the power of the finger far exceeded the power of the hand. The Ziying sword collided with the finger and immediately erupted with a boom. Terrifying ripples of energy, along with slivers of sword qi, wreaked havoc in the tunnel, causing it to violently shake. If the tunnel had not become much tougher over the past few years, just this clash would have been enough to shatter it. After all, this was a clash among returnance experts. The level of intensity that came from this interaction could not be compared to a clash among receival experts. The energy finger dispersed into a storm of violent energy that caused destruction in the tunnel. The Ziying sword hovered, releasing a bright violet light. Even though it seemed like a tiny boat in a stormy sea, it hovered there as if it was unmovable. No matter how ferocious the storms of energy were, they were unable to break through the region of light. That place seemed to be a whole different domain altogether. Swish! Suddenly, the Ziying sword turned into a violet streak of light and tore through the region where the energy was running amok. It flew toward the depths of the tunnel while releasing powerful sword chi, arriving before the saint emperors of the world of forsaken saints in the blink of an eye. It pierced through their bodies at an unbelievable speed and deposited a strand of powerful sword chi in all the saint emperors it pierced. The sword chi would surge toward the saint emperors' souls and grind them to dust. Even though it was a tiny sliver of sword chi, the saint emperors could not fend it off. No matter where the saint emperors were wounded, they were unable to avoid death once they were pierced by the Ziying sword. In a short moment, over 20 saint emperors were slain by the Ziying sword. The other saint emperors all revealed drastically different expressions at this sight. They all began to shiver and stopped their advance together. However, they showed no fear on their faces because they understood the strength of the world they were attacking. Their world of forsaken saints was not without returnance experts either, and they had far more than one. The 8 elders of the Sacred Spirit Hall had all reached the returnance realm. The returnance experts of the foreign world would never sit back and watch the Ziying sword slaughter their saint emperors. When the Ziying sword killed over 20 people, a black streak of light shot over from the depths of the tunnel, colliding with the sword. With a boom, the Ziying sword was knocked several hundred meters away. The glow of the sword dulled. However, the black streak of light had also been knocked several hundred meters back and had also dulled. Only now was it visible. It was actually a metal mace, shining with a dark light. The shaking of the tunnel became even more violent. The collision between the two weapons had caused an even more powerful storm of energy to erupt. However, due to the presences of the Ziying sword and the metal mace, the storm was unable to expand throughout the tunnel. It was forcefully trapped between the two of them. It formed a great whirlpool, which rapidly revolved. A huge figure walked through the group of saint emperors. He was a burly man 4 meters tall. His chest was bare and so were his feet. He stepped through the tunnel, and with each step, the tunnel would shake and form tiny cracks. It seemed like the space under his foot was about to collapse. The man was middle-aged. He possessed short hair and a sharp pair of eyes. He was ugly and radiated with killing intent, as if he was a fiend. The saint emperors from the world of forsaken saints all bowed to the man and politely said, "Greetings to Elder Xiong." The man referred to as Elder Xiong paid no attention to the bowing saint emperors behind him. He stared at the Ziying sword for a while before snoring. He really has comprehended the way of the sword, just like the Spirit King. I sense a similar presence of sharpness. However, it's much weaker. With a wave of his hand, the metal mace immediately returned to it. Xiongzhong took a step and shot forward like a loose arrow. He collided with the whirlpool of energy, causing it to dissipate. However, he did not slow down at all, arriving before the Ziying sword in a single moment. He used his mace to smash at the sword. The power in his swing was extremely great. It was enough to shatter the Tianyuan continent. As the mace fell, the tunnel trembled even more violently. Wherever the weapon passed, the space around it would distort severely, as if it was about to rip open. The Ziying sword showed no signs of weakness. It immediately erupted with a bright light, which poured into the surroundings. It dyed this section of the tunnel a beautiful violet. The light also contained powerful sword chi. Behind the Ziying sword, the Qing Sua sword shot over as a long streak of light. It weaved together with the Ziying sword, and the two swords began to revolve like a yin and yang diagram. They collided with Xiongzhong's attack. Chapter 1526. Fighting Xiongzhong One Boom. This clash was even more intense than the last. Just the sound from it was unimaginably powerful. The terrifying sound waves expanded and collided with the tunnel walls, causing them to become extremely unstable. The Saint Emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints all paled, while the weaker ones began to bleed from their ears. Their heads ached. Their souls had almost been injured. Xiongzhong wielded his metal mace and stood as still as a mountain. His tremendous presence prevented the residual energy from approaching him. At the same time, he intentionally suppressed the violent energy, causing it to rapidly expand in the direction of the Tianyuan continent. If it reached the continent, it would destroy a significant portion of the continent. On the other hand, the azulate sword swiftly shot back. They had not gained the upper hand in this clash. Wielded by a returnance expert, the metal mace was just far too powerful. The two swords were unable to deal with it, even when they worked together. I'll carve out a mouth. You all follow me. Because we couldn't send people who were too powerful. We've already been blocked twice by the people of this world. This time, we have to overpower this world and take it by force. The puny people in this foreign world will kneel before us, Xiongzhong coldly said. His gaze was extremely sharp and filled with a heavy killing intent. He flashed a bloodthirsty smile. Their world of Forsaken Saints definitely outshone the other world in terms of power, but their attacks had been repelled twice. They had lost quite a few people because of this, particularly during the second attempt. They had sent 5 receival experts, but in the end, only 2 made it back. The other 3 all died. Their world could ignore losses on the level of Saint Emperors, but they needed to care about Origin Realm experts. The death of 3 Origin Realm experts had angered the other Origin Realm experts in the foreign world. As Xiongzhong advanced, a figure appeared at the exit to the Tianyuan continent. He was not old, only appearing to be in his 20s. His handsome and resolute face possessed the weathering of storms of blood. His eyes were bright and sharp like drawn swords. They seemed to be able to penetrate the soul. There seemed to be 2 powerful swords hidden in his eyes. This expert was Jianchen. He had also entered the tunnel, advancing forward step by step. The azulate swords hovered above him as he glared at Xiongzhong. He released a powerful battle intent, as well as an invisible presence. It stopped the residual energy that had been forced over by Xiongzhong, preventing it from reaching the Tianyuan continent. Xiongzhong squinted. He observed Jianchen and revealed some joy on his ugly face. In the end, the two of them stopped 1,000 meters from each other. Their presences and pressures mixed, gradually forming a terrifying whirlpool of energy. So you're that person who's comprehended the way of the sword like the Spirit King. You possess the right to reach godhood, but I find it very strange that I can't see through your true strength. I can only vaguely sense it. It shouldn't be at returnance. No, it hasn't even reached the origin realm. How is this possible? Xiongzhong communicated using his soul. He began speaking jokingly, except he gradually became stern when he came to a startling conclusion. He could not help but gasp when he uttered his last words. He was unable to contain his shock. He was unable to believe that the mysterious expert, who had comprehended the way of the sword just like the Spirit King, gained the attention of several dozen origin experts from the world of Forsaken Saints, and had clashed with him 3 times earlier, was a young man who had not even reached the origin realm. Xiongzhong was truly shocked when he caught a vague glimpse of Jianchen's true strength. His heart churned as disbelief flooded his face. If Jianchen's true strength was at the same level as his, he would not have reacted so violently, but Jianchen had not even reached the origin realm. Xiongzhong found it unbelievable that a person who had not even reached the origin realm possessed the power to fight him, and not fall to a disadvantage. If it were not for the fact that this entire matter was unfolding before him, he would have never believed it. The world of Forsaken Saints actually has late returnance experts. Looks like you should be the strongest beneath the Spirit King in your world. Jianchen also replied using his soul. He was very stern. Communicating through souls completely avoided the problems caused by the 2 different languages. They could converse normally using their souls. Xiongzhong sucked in a deep breath and gradually calmed down. His opinion of Jianchen underwent a drastic change as well. He considered Jianchen a monster. He said, "I am not the strongest beneath the Spirit King. The strongest is Ouyang Yangwen. We are both at late returnants, but I must admit that he's stronger than me." Jianchen's heart sank. The world of Forsaken Saints actually possessed 2 late returnants experts. This was extremely bad for him, because Xiaoling and Changyang Mingyue had not reached late returnants. "My name is Xiongzhong. I am one of the 8 elders of the Sacred Spirit Hall. Prodigy from another world, state your name. You have the right to be remembered by me forever." Xiongzhong calmed down very quickly and coldly spoke to Jianchen. A viciousness appeared in his eyes. "Jianchen, Jianchen, I will remember you. Even if you are an unprecedented prodigy, there is only death if you are unable to pass through me. I will use my full strength without mercy no matter how powerful you are. If you die in my hands, you will be the most talented genius I have ever killed." "It will be my honor," Xiongzhong nonchalantly said. A powerful killing intent surged from him, and the metal mace in his hand began to shine with a dark light as well. Not only did the entire tunnel sink into darkness because of the light, but even the violet and azure lights radiating from the azulite swords were suppressed. Xiongzhong had only casually swung his mace the last 3 times. Only now did he begin to act serious. He displayed his full strength without holding back at all. He was far, far stronger than before. Jianchen became extremely stern. Faced against Xiongzhong, he felt extremely pressured. However, this was not the time for him to shy away from the battle. With a thought, the Ziying sword turned into a streak of violet light and flew into his hand. When he wielded it with his right hand, his presence skyrocketed. He seemed to have become a divine sword with shocking might. Compared to how ordinary he had appeared before, he was now radiating with a soaring sword chi. The sword chi was invisible, but extremely powerful. It seemed to have become a part of the laws of the world, affecting the region around him. Wherever the sword chi enveloped, the violent streams of energy in the tunnel would quieten down. They would then morph due to the influence of the sword chi, turning into visible strands of sword chi. Jianchen's body was enshrouded by a powerful layer of bright light. He used the way of the sword to protect himself, and seemed to have become a miniature sun. Only a hazy figure was visible. The Ziying sword also shone with a blinding white light. Its violet glow had been suppressed inside. It was then sent toward Xiongzhong with all its power. Xiongzhong's eyes lit up. His right arm became riddled with veins as a terrifying energy surged out of his body and into the mace. This energy caused it to shine extremely bright. He then swung it toward the Ziying sword as hard as he could. Both Xiongzhong and Jianchen used their full strength. Xiongzhong was more powerful than Jianchen, but he knew that Jianchen had comprehended the way of the sword. He had come in contact with the laws of the world, and was able to use the power of laws. So he dared not to show any carelessness, even though he knew that Jianchen's exact strength had not even reached the origin realm. On the other hand, Jianchen needed to use his full strength. That was the only way he could take on a late returnants expert. Chapter 1527. Fighting Xiongzhong 2. The clash between Jianchen's Ziying sword and Xiongzhong's metal mace created countless more energy ripples. The tunnel, which had become extremely tough, enough for returnants experts to pass through, cracked. These cracks covered the entire tunnel, and each one was several meters long. They crisscrossed with one another, forming something like a web. The tunnel looked like it was going to rip in half. Jianchen's expression suddenly changed the moment the Ziying sword struck the metal mace. An extremely powerful force was transferred into the Ziying sword. Not only did the force numb his entire right hand, but it even caused it to ache. He actually felt like he temporarily lost his right hand altogether. That was not all that happened. The moment the metal mace had fallen, it had erupted with extremely great power. As soon as the two weapons clashed, it landed heavily on Jianchen's chest. Jianchen's protective light was penetrated by this attack of energy. It tore through his defenses and landed on his chest like a hot knife through butter. Jianchen grunted. His entire body was blown back, almost being knocked out of the tunnel and into the sky of the Tianyuan continent. Jianchen stabilized himself with great difficulty. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, and with a glance at his right hand, he discovered that it had been dyed red. The webbing between his thumb and index fingers had been torn. Jianchen sucked in a deep breath and tightened his grip on the Ziying sword. He stared at Xiongzhong with great interest as battle intent roared within him. Xiongzhong was indeed very powerful, far more powerful than Jianchen. But not only did Jianchen fail to reveal any fear, but this clash had provoked his desire for battle. The chaotic Niden within Jianchen's body began to revolve as strands of chaotic force surged out of it. The chaotic force rapidly circulated through his body, filling every corner. Not only did Jianchen push the defenses of his chaotic body to its limits, but his wounds rapidly began to heal as well. The torn part between his fingers rapidly closed, returning to its original appearance in just a few short seconds. Xiongzhong remained where he was. He had not taken a single step back. However, his huge body had trembled slightly. Several dozen sword slashes covered the upper half of his body. Each slash was extremely thin and a random length. They were not very deep either, and were quite difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. They only managed to draw some blood. These wounds were all due to residual sword qi, but they were just scratches to Xiongzhong. He did not feel the slashes at all. He stared at the metal mace in his hands, and his eyes were filled with an odd light. An extremely eye-catching white mark was now present on the dark mace. Xiongzhong looked at the azulate swords. His eyes continued to shine with an odd light. He said with praise, "These two swords really are impressive. They're far more powerful than my Heavenquaker. They are probably no weaker than the Spirit King's Cloudstream sword. I may not be in need of weapons like that, but I don't mind collecting them. At the end of the battle, those two swords will belong to me." As soon as Xiongzhong said that, he charged at Jianchen with his metal mace. He said, "Let's finish this quick, just in case Ouyang Yangwen hears of them. He also uses the sword." A cold light flashed through Jianchen's eyes when he heard Xiongzhong. He used the illusory flash and became a blur, charging forward in a hurry. The Ziying sword had turned into a blinding streak of light as he stabbed it forward, while surrounded by a resplendent white light. As he stabbed out, a sword intent that was much more powerful than before enveloped the region. The sword intent seemed to come from the heavens, crushing down with an overwhelming presence. It also seemed like it had appeared from the surrounding void, filling the tunnel with a heavy pressure, as if the space within the tunnel had become a domain of the sword. Extremely sharp sword qi was present everywhere, running amok in the surroundings. The Ziying sword moved extremely quickly. It let out a resplendent white light, causing the surroundings to appear duller. It seemed to have become the only existence in the world. Jianchen used his powers of partial achievement sword origin. Although the difference between minor and partial achievement was only a tiny step, the way of the sword was a law of the world. Jianchen could use slightly more of the power of laws, so just this tiny difference was enough to give him an unimaginably great increase in strength. The threat it posed to those who had not comprehended laws was unimaginable. It was similar to the threat that origin energy posed to Saint Emperors. Xiongzhong became rather stern. He could clearly sense that Jianchen was much stronger than before. He needed to face the power of laws within the strike seriously. "I never thought his comprehension of laws has reached such a level. It's getting closer to where the Spirit King is. I can sense that it's not much weaker than the Spirit King's comprehension. His talent is even greater than the Spirit King's." Xiongzhong sighed in amazement inside. He felt more and more admiration for Jianchen, because Jianchen's true strength was nowhere near his own. Yet Jianchen had comprehended a law, and comprehended so much of it already. Boom! The Ziying sword and the metal mace clashed once again. This time, Jianchen managed to remain on equal ground with Xiongzhong by using the power of the way of the sword. They were basically locked in a stalemate. Xiongzhong's body shook violently as he took 3 steps back. The tunnel would shake with every step he took, so it trembled a total of 3 times. Jianchen had not been blown away like last time, but he also staggered 5 steps back. Thin cracks would appear in the tunnel with every step he told, but they would close up in the blink of an eye. The webbing between his thumb and index finger had torn once again. A droplet of blood oozed out, falling out of the area protected by Jian Chen's light. It was torn to pieces by the rampant residual energy. Another several dozen thin sword slashes had appeared on Xiongzhong's burly body. They were deeper than before, forcing Xiongzhong to cast a barrier around himself. As soon as Jian Chen stabilized himself, he pushed off with one foot. He shot off like an arrow, charging toward Xiongzhong with a seemingly unstoppable force. He stabbed the Ziying sword at Xiongzhong in a way that seemed no weaker than the attack before. The Qing Sua sword also hovered above him. It was covered by a layer of white light. It also stabbed at Xiongzhong with a surging sword qi. Xiongzhong roared and his presence suddenly skyrocketed. Like a god of war, he faced Jian Chen with a tremendous, terrifying pressure. Booms rang out constantly, as the two of them clashed around a dozen times. Destructive energy shot out after every collision of their weapons, causing the tunnel to constantly shake. Cracks never stopped appearing. Boom! With a heavy sound, Jian Chen's chest was struck by Xiongzhong's mace. His entire chest collapsed as the powerful shockwave passed through his body, punching a hole through him. A bowl-sized hole appeared, obliterating his organs. On the other hand, Jian Chen's Ziying sword managed to pierce Xiongzhong's protective barrier in his waist. Even though the wound was only 2 inches deep, it had deposited a strand of the power of laws. A sliver of sword qi lingered where the wound was. The Qing Sua sword had also managed to leave an inch-deep wound in his back, causing it to become dyed with blood. Jian Chen was blown away once again. He was pale. Xiongzhong staggered back. He was in a horrible shape. Chapter 1528. Ouyang Yangwen Jian. Chen only managed to shake off the force after being blown to the edge of the tunnel's entrance. He immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. The clothes on his upper body had already been reduced to shreds the moment the mace had struck him, so the gaping hole in his chest was extremely eye-catching. All the flesh and blood there had vanished. Jian Chen was slightly out of breath. He lowered his head to examine his wound, before looking forward once again. Xiongzhong, who had become blurry since he was so far away, did not immediately begin fighting again. Instead, he healed as quickly as he could. This time, Jian Chen used a strand of radiant Saint Force origin energy, without any hesitation. His body was covered by a dense layer of milky white light. The gentle origin energy fused with the wound on his chest, and coupled with the powerful regeneration abilities of his chaotic body, his wound immediately began to heal at an astonishing rate. The flesh around the hole in his chest began to regrow. Even though Jian Chen was extremely injured, he quickly made a full recovery with his powers as a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master. On the other side, Xiongzhong constantly staggered back before colliding with the Saint Emperor behind him. The Saint Emperor vomited blood from the collision and was blown away. The Saint Emperors of the foreign world carefully arrived before Xiongzhong. They gazed at his wounds and asked out of habit, "Elder Xiong, are you fine? Do you want us to call the Grand Elder for support?" Xiongzhong snorted as 2 streams of white air poured out of his nose. He pushed away the Saint Emperor, who had asked about his well-being, and said coldly, "There's no need for you to find Ouyang Yangwen to deal with someone who hasn't even reached the origin realm. If Jian Chen didn't have 2 powerful weapons, and his comprehension of the way of the sword was not as great, how would he be able to stop my advance?" Reaching there, Xiongzhong sneered. Laws are the key to reaching godhood. In the countless years our world of forsaken saints has existed, we've given birth to countless spirit kings. Who knows how many people have reached reciprocity? However, none of them have ever managed to comprehend laws. Only the appearance of our current spirit king managed to disprove the rumor that no one in our world could comprehend laws. He's become a legend of our world. Meanwhile, Jian Chen has comprehended the same type of law, but he's too weak. I need to kill him in this battle. Not only will it give me merit, but I'll be able to purge any future problems as well. And those 2 swords cannot end up in Ouyang Yangwen's hands no matter what. A frigid light flashed through Xiongzhong's eyes. He did not want to give Jian Chen the time to catch his breath, so he suddenly charged forward. However, the muscles on his face twisted unnaturally as he moved. He was experiencing intense pain. These goddamn power of laws prevent wounds from healing. This is a power controlled by godhood experts. It's a great threat to origin realm experts. Even though only a tiny sliver has been deposited in my body, I'm unable to purge it without expending a lot of time with my strength at late returnants. Xiongzhong immediately frowned when he looked at the slashes on his body. They all possessed the power of laws. He needed to devote a portion of his strength to suppress the powers and prevent the wounds from becoming even more severe. However, that would lead to a loss in battle prowess. Xiongzhong, if you really can't do it, back off. Stop trying to do what you can't. Look at you. Not only have you been reduced to such a horrible condition, but you've even been injured. TSK. Those wounds caused by the power of laws aren't easy to be dealt with. And according to my understanding, the person who's comprehended the way of the sword hasn't even reached returnants. If I were you, I would hide in the world of forsaken saints, away from the public out of shame for being injured by a person who's not even at returnants despite being late returnants. A feminine voice rang out from behind. It was obviously mocking Xiongzhong. Xiongzhong's face suddenly sank as a sliver of cold killing intent flashed through his eyes. He coldly replied without even looking back. Ouyang Yangwen, don't get too cocky. He also uses the sword, but compared to you he's far greater. His strength is indeed not as great as mine, but even if you take him on all by yourself, you won't come out fine. Xiongzhong, you're describing the wrong person. It's normal if you are injured by him, but against me, it would be no different than squashing an ant. The feminine voice rang out once again. It was filled with arrogance, holding no regard for Jian Chen. When the voice vanished, three figures gradually appeared behind Xiongzhong. The person to the left was a short old man. He seemed extremely old. His wrinkles had all squished together. He was bald and hunchbacked, as if it was extremely difficult just for him to walk. He gave people the feeling that he had reached the end of his life and was about to pass away. The person in the middle was a young man who seemed less than 20 years old. His handsome face was indescribable. If it were not for a few features that seemed masculine, it would have been extremely easy to mistake him as an alluring beauty. However, the young man lacked the masculinity present in men. Instead, he was filled with a feminine presence, which was a rather disturbing sight. The person to the right was an extremely seductive woman. Her body was curvy while her dark hair was glossy. She possessed a pair of alluring eyes and extremely exquisite facial features. Coupled with the charm she unintentionally revealed when she spoke or smiled, the woman seemed like a seductress. Gongxi Ming Cheng Jingyan, why have you come? Xiongzhong asked as his eyes glowed with a cold, merciless light. The woman gently smiled. She radiated with charm as she giggled. The Spirit King has given orders, so how is it possible for us not to come? Xiongzhong, the disturbance you caused in the tunnel is far too great, which has already displeased the Spirit King. I clearly saw him frown. Did the Spirit King really frown? Xiongzhong's expression finally changed. He became rather uneasy. It seemed like he had committed a mistake. Although the current Spirit King in the world of Forsaken Saints was ruthless, he'd be described as benevolent compared to the past Spirit Kings. However, the fear he struck in the hearts of the other receival and returnance experts was far greater than any Spirit King in the past. This was because the current Spirit King was just far too powerful. There was no exaggeration at all to call him the strongest throughout the history of the world of Forsaken Saints. He had gained the right to reach godhood. His battle prowess had already reached godhood, even if he would be regarded as the weakest among the higher realm of cultivation. Chapter 1529. Spirit Sage Xiongzhong. Do you really not understand, or are you just acting like you don't? The toughness of the tunnel only permits late returnants experts to pass through. If a reciprocity expert enters the tunnel will collapse. Even early reciprocity experts may not be able to pass through safely, let alone the Spirit King, who has reached mid-reciprocity. Your intense battle within the tunnel has already damaged it. Once the tunnel becomes severely damaged, not only will it be impossible for the Spirit King to pass though, but it'll be extremely difficult for us as well. If we're stopped by the people of the foreign world at that time, we might even be forced to travel back through the collapsing tunnel. The woman stared at Xiongzhong and spoke with a high-pitched voice. She gave off a certain charm. Xiongzhong's face changed when he heard her words, and the metal mace in his hand dropped. He stared at the blurry Jianchen and said, I really hadn't thought of that. Chiang Jingyan, thank you for your reminder. However, the person who's also comprehended the way of the sword from the other world really does have some skill. He's blocking the tunnel. For me to pass through, I need to spend some time to kill him. The feminine young man sneered. Xiongzhong, from what Qing Jingyan has said, I've suddenly thought of a possibility. Have you purposefully begun fighting with the opponent, so that you can damage the tunnel, and then charge out, so that we're trapped in the world of forsaken saints? It might just be a few years at most, but that's more than enough time for you to leave through the other world, and enter the saints' world in search of the most pure bloodline left behind by our ancestors, the spirit sages. And once you obtain the power of the bloodline, and return to our homeland, probably even the great spirit king won't be as powerful as you. Xiongzhong sneered. He glared at the feminine man and coldly said, Ouyang Yangwen, do not talk nonsense. I am loyal to the spirit king, and only the spirit king. So how could I possibly think of something like that? At the same time, it was also the spirit king who told us that we, the forsaken saint race, are actually spirit sages that have taken cover. And regarding the search for our most pure ancestral bloodline, do you really think that it'll present itself before me as soon as I enter the saints' world? I cannot determine that, but since we, the forsaken saints, are a part of the spirit sages, who knows if there will be any reaction from the most pure bloodline once we reach the saints' world? And if it does happen, a few years would be enough to obtain the ancestral bloodline and return to our homeland, Ouyang Yangwen conjectured. He targeted Xiongzhong through what he was saying. Enough. Ouyang Yangwen, Xiongzhong, stop arguing. Hurry up and pass through the tunnel, so you don't displease the spirit king anymore, Qing Jingyan said rather impatiently. Her charming voice was enough to enchant people, so it was very difficult to become infuriated by her. As soon as Qing Jingyan brought up the spirit king, both Ouyang Yangwen and Xiongzhong revealed deep fear in their eyes. The two of them immediately stopped arguing, as the four of them advanced together. None of them knew much about the secret regarding the spirit sages. This was a secret that the current spirit king had learned by surpassing the origin realm in terms of battle prowess, and by smashing through the seal in the depths of the sacred spirit hall, which he then told them. Not only did the hall holding the secret require someone with the strength of godhood, but it also required them to possess that strength just to enter. They would learn many ancient secrets hidden in the hall, but right now, the four of them did not know much about the matter of spirit sages. The milky white light around Jianchen gradually disappeared. After healing, Jianchen had recovered completely from his wounds. He watched the four figures rapidly approach him, and immediately became extremely stern. This was because he could tell with a single glance that all four of them were actually returnance experts. Even the weakest had reached mid-returnance, while several other figures had appeared behind them. They were receival experts. This time, the world of forsaken saints had not sent saint emperors as the vanguard but origin realm experts. Jianchen knew that it was no longer possible for him to stop this many origin realm experts. He retreated without any hesitation. At the same time, the 49 saint emperors, controlling the 7 ancestral weapons, gradually retreated. The myriad armament formation could only keep receival experts at bay. They needed to avoid returnance experts. A golden light shone from the center of Jianchen's eyes, and a fist-sized golden tower suddenly appeared. With a flash of golden light, several thousand powerful presences appeared in the surroundings. They were expressionless people. All of them were the king armaments and emperor armaments that Jianchen had revived. There were around 700 or 800 saint emperors, while the rest were saint kings. With the addition of several thousand saint kings and several hundred saint emperors, the main force of the Tianyuan continent had increased by an entire fold. The president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union had arrived as well. They brought along the ruler armaments and king armaments they had revived. Although they had only revived a few hundred king armaments, they had managed to revive over 10,000 ruler armaments. This was a force to be reckoned with. It made up for the lack of sainthood experts among the four races. A dense crowd of people hovered above the ruins of Mercenary City. The humans, the magical beasts, the members of the sea race, and the 100 races all stood in their strongest forms. Every single one of them was prepared for battle, waiting for the arrival of the foreign army. Very soon, the four returnance experts from the world of Forsaken Saints exited the tunnel. The moment they stepped out onto the continent, their presences immediately rolled out. The terrifying presences from four returnance experts immediately obliterated the dense layer of clouds in the sky. Under the terrifying pressure, the clouds had dispersed, reduced to nothing. The presence pressed against space, but even space found it rather difficult to endure. The space in a radius of 10,000 kilometers violently shook. It twisted and distorted, warping the sunlight and causing the entire region to descend into darkness. They had truly drained the colors from the region. The Tianyuan continent violently shook. The ground sank and mountains collapsed, as if the apocalypse had arrived. The saint rulers, saint kings, and saint emperors of the four races constantly retreated from the terrifying presences. All of them had paled and several saint rulers spat blood from their mouths. Only those fearless, painless puppets remained where they were. But they had become immobilized by the presences. "Stop them!" Jianshan cried out. He glanced at the four returnance experts. His gaze soon became fixated on Ouyang Yangwen. With a flip of his hand, a disc appeared in it. A Bagua diagram was engraved onto the disc. It let out with a faint azure light while a mysterious, ancient presence circulated through it. Chapter 1530. Domain of the Snow Goddess. The moment the four returnance experts from the world of Forsaken Saints caught a glimpse of the azure disc in Jianshan's hands, they immediately felt shocked inside. The seductive Qing Jingyun could not help but cry out in surprise. "Isn't that the secret treasure that the Spirit King bestowed to Ku Mu? This treasure can't be used without the corresponding secret technique. How does he know the method to use it?" Xiong Zhong and Ouyang Yangwen's faces changed slightly as well. The gazes they sent toward the disc were filled with fear. Back in the world of Forsaken Saints, the Spirit King had experimented on the two of them with the disc, so they understood its power extremely well. Once trapped, even reciprocity experts would struggle to break free in a short amount of time, let alone them, returnance experts. The azure disc grew even brighter as Jianshan formed a hand seal. It gave off an odd presence, which was both mysterious and ancient, that circled through it. Jianshan then extended a finger toward Ouyang Yangwen. The disc seemed to have received a command. It flew toward Ouyang Yangwen as a streak of azure light. Along the way, it constantly expanded, becoming 3 meters long. Ouyang Yangwen's eyes narrowed. He could sense how bad the situation was, so he cried out. I never thought he would actually find a method that would allow him to use this secret treasure. However, how can the method that he found compare to the true method of control? It definitely can't last for long. It might not even be able to unleash the true might of the treasure. Ouyang Yangwen then turned to Xiong Zhong and said, Xiong Zhong, let's work together to fend off this treasure. The treasure only possesses half of its original strength, so it won't be a problem for us. Xiong Zhong smiled as if he had just heard a joke. Not only did he show no intentions of helping Ouyang Yangwen, but he shot away with a single movement and sneered. Ouyang Yangwen, since this treasure only has half of its original power, you can handle it by yourself. Why do you still need me? A cold light shone in Ouyang Yangwen's eyes. As he watched the disc approach him, he became extremely stern. With a flip of his hand, an exquisite dagger that was 3 inches long immediately appeared in his hand. It did not seem special, but the moment it appeared, a powerful sword qi immediately spread through the surroundings, causing them to shake. Meanwhile, the dagger shot toward the disc as well. The moment it left his hand, it became 1,000 meters long, shooting toward the center of the disc with a great presence. Ouyang Yangwen understood the power of the disc, so he did not hold back at all when he attacked. He reserved some hope inside, He hoped that Jian Shun had not found the secret technique of the disc and could thus only use less than half of its power. That way, there was a chance he would be able to fend it off. When the huge sword touched the disc, there were no earth-shaking sounds. Instead, the light from the disc grew, conjuring a huge bagua diagram. The devastating power coming from the sword was easily nullified by the diagram. The disc continued on without slowing down at all. It continued to loom over Ouyang Yangwen. Ouyang Yangwen possessed the strength of a late returnance expert, but he was unable to dodge the disc. In the end, his body became encased in a cage made from azure light. The disc was filled with a sealing force, so not only did it completely seal away Ouyang Yangwen's powers, but it immobilized him as well. Ouyang Yangwen's face sank as flames of rage burned within him. The disc had originally been bestowed to Ku Mu by the Spirit King to deal with the returnance expert of the other world. Yet now, the people of the other world had learned how to use it, and had used it against him. They had truly bitten off more than they could chew. Ouyang Yangwen had never expected that he would become trapped by something from his own world, as the expert known to be the most powerful beneath the Spirit King. Even the 3 other returnance experts had never considered the idea. Huge flakes of snow suddenly began to fall from the sky, while the surrounding temperature plummeted. In just a few seconds, the temperature was terrifyingly low. A thick layer of frost appeared on the ground, spreading across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Changyang Mingyue hovered in the air with her snow-white hair. Her arms were open while her head was slightly tilted up, gazing at the sky. She seemed like she had embraced the world. Slivers of profound white ice chi radiated from her, and fused with her surroundings. Every single strand of the power she let out was terrifyingly cold. Her body was also extremely frigid. The space around her seemed to have frozen, due to the coldness of her body. Domain of the ice goddess, icebound. Suddenly Changyang Mingyue yelled. With that, the temperature in a radius of 100,000 kilometers seemed to have reached absolute zero. Thick layers of frost rose up from the ground, having become countless times tougher than steel. Everything in a 10,000-kilometer region seemed to have become a separate domain with its own laws. Beyond the domain, snow and ice rapidly expanded at an astonishing pace. The snow and ice reached the Jessen Kingdom 1,000,000 kilometers away in no time. The ground there became snow-white, while the countless cities of various sizes became covered with thick frost. The frost had enveloped the entire continent, reducing it to an icebound land. The frost was terrifying, but beyond the independent domain, it posed no threat to the people on the continent. Oh no! 10% of my strength has been suppressed. What is this ability? It can actually take away 1/10 of my power. Cheng Jingyin's face changed, now filled with shock. I've lost 1/10 of my power as well. The old man among the 4 returnance experts, Gong Shiming, also added with a deep voice. He stared at Changyang Mingyue sternly and said, I never thought that there would be more than just the one returnance expert we had initially noticed here. There's actually 3 of them. She's cast the ability at early returnance, yet it's actually enough to take 1/10 of our strength, the strength of mid-returnance. This ability is impressive, but it's useless against late returnance experts. Xiongzhong indifferently glanced at Changyang Mingyue, and did not take her existence to heart. He then looked at Jian Shun and said, Our battle still hasn't ended. Your 2 swords are fated to become a part of my collection. With that, Xiongzhong charged at Jian Shun. Jian Shun felt no fear at all. He coldly said, My azulate swords aren't so easy to take from me. Let's fight in outer space. Jian Shun stood on the Ziying sword, and turned into a violet streak of light that shot into the sky. He vanished in the blink of an eye. I'll deal with the woman. Even if I've lost 1/10 of my strength, it's still more than enough for me to deal with an early returnance expert with my power at mid-returnance. Chang Jingyan stared at Changyang Mingyue and seductively smiled before charging toward her. Gong Shiming's gaze landed on Xiaoling. He said with an old and rather husky voice, Then leave the last returnance expert to me. Xiaoling immediately became extremely solemn when she saw Gong Shiming fly toward her. She did not immediately begin to fight Gong Shiming. Instead, she turned around and flew toward outer space, leading Gongxi Ming away from the Tianyuan continent. Cheng Jingyan's flesh, life and even soul seemed to have become ice crystals when she had been frozen just then, having fused with the surroundings. The space was not the only thing that had been shattered by Changyang Mingyue's palm strike. This included the layer of frost on Cheng Jingyan, as well as her flesh, life and soul. Spurt. Cheng Jingyan vomited blood as her face became extremely pale in that moment. Her clothes had fallen from the sky in the form of pieces of ice, revealing her enchanting figure. However, her body was no longer as white as before. Instead, it had become dyed red from all the blood that oozed out from her countless pores. What is this ability? Cheng Jingyan's eyes had widened as she stared at Changyang Mingyue in shock. Disbelief had flooded her face. Even though she had lost 10% of her strength, dealing with an early returnance expert with her strength at mid-returnance was still a piece of cake. However, this was the exact opposite. She had been injured by Changyang Mingyue from the clash. The wounds were extremely severe as well. Not only did she sustain great damage to her body, basically having been shattered like a piece of ice, even a tenth of the strength in her body seemed to have been severed away, injuring her vital essence. Even her soul was injured, causing her head to ache. Cheng Jingyan was extremely shocked. Was the woman in white really at early returnance? Why was she so terrifying? She had never heard or seen such an odd method of attack. This is an ability I've come up myself. The name is by fate. Anything frozen by the ability will completely fuse with the profound ice, where they cannot be separated anymore. If the ice is fine, they will be fine as well, but if the ice shatter, they die. It's just a pity that I can't use the full power of this ability, or you would have shattered with the ice just then, Changyang Mingyue said nonchalantly. However, she immediately showed some suspicion and confusion after saying that. She never remembered coming up with an ability like that, or why she would ever say something like that. Soon afterward, she thought about the domain of the ice goddess she had just used, and she became even more confused. She had even become at a loss what she should do next. She had not practiced these abilities at all back at the ice goddess hall. She seemed to have learnt them suddenly, and used them unintentionally. Why would it be like this? Changyang Mingyue questioned herself inside, suddenly becoming extremely confused. In that moment, she could not help but think of a few things that Protector Shui had told her in the past, as well as how she treated her words like they were commands on her life. Am I really the snow goddess? Am I the holy maiden of the ice goddess hall from the saints' world? Is the ice goddess my elder sister? Changyang Mingyue thought. She had never believed this in the past, because she had no memories of them at all. However, she suddenly knew abilities that she had never learnt in the past at all. She had only come up with them today. It pointed to the fact that she seemed to have remembered some forgotten memories. I'm not the snow goddess. I'm Changyang Mingyue. I've the young lady of the Changyang clan, Changyang Mingyue. Changyang Mingyue seemed to have been stimulated suddenly after a moment of silence, no longer able to retain her composure as she roared out wildly. She attacked the injured Cheng Jingyan desperately. Changyang Mingyue felt no joy in learning of this at all. Instead, she felt constrained. She did not want to turn into another person, nor admit that she was the snow goddess. This was because she had learnt from Protector Shui that she and Jian Shen were people of two different worlds, where they would become enemies sooner or later. At that time, Changyang Mingyue did not believe herself to be the snow goddess, so she believed that even if she would become Jian Shen's enemy in the future, it would just be the snow goddess, not her, Changyang Mingyue. Chapter 1532. Death of an Origin Realm expert. Terrifying coldness permeated the surroundings as strands of white, profound ice chi shot off in all directions. Changyang Mingyue engaged in an intense battle against Cheng Jingyan in the air. Changyang Mingyue felt extremely irritated after learning that she might be the snow goddess Protector Shui had mentioned. Cheng Fengyan, on the other hand, had become Changyang Mingyue's emotional release. Changyang Mingyue fought as hard as she could against Cheng Jingyan, Booms constantly rang out, causing the ground below to collapse. The space around them distorted violently as well. If Changyang Mingyue had not created the domain, which strengthened the space around them, then just the terrifying shockwaves from their battle would have been enough to destroy the Tianyuan continent. Cheng Fengyan was bathed in her own blood. Even though she was at mid-returnance, she was beaten into a retreat by Changyang Mingyue's intense attacks. White crystals would appear on Cheng Jingyan's body from time to time, forcing her to devote a portion of her strength to stop the expansion of the crystals, while she fended off Changyang Mingyue's intense barrage of attacks. She had suffered from Changyang Mingyue's by fate earlier, having sustained extremely severe wounds. She obviously needed to pay particular attention to the crystals that would appear on her from time to time. As long as she was not frozen by them, Changyang Mingyue would not be able to use her ability again. Who is this woman? Why is she so powerful? She's clearly just at early returnance, but she can keep me at bay, and this coldness is just too powerful. Even I have to remain wary of it, Cheng Jingyan grumbled inside. She glanced beyond the domain before immediately charging toward the sky, attempting to break free from the domain. Once the domain was gone, she could use all her strength. Coupled with her secret techniques, she believed that they would be enough to stop her retreat, even if they were not enough to defeat Changyang Mingyue. Boom! However, when Cheng Jingyan was about to charge out of the domain, she seemed to have hit a wall and produced a heavy thud. She was unable to leave the domain. Changyang Mingyue's domain was like a cage. She could not leave unless she smashed through it. Changyang Mingyue flew up from below ready to attack. Her entire body was surrounded by a terrifying coldness as she charged after Cheng Jingyan. Cheng Jingyan became stern. She glanced at Xiong Zhong and Gong Shiming, who were fighting in outer space, and gritted her teeth. Since you don't want me to leave, then I'll smash through this domain. With a flip of her hand, a 1.5-meter-long whip suddenly appeared. The whip was made from some unknown material. It seemed simple, yet it radiated ripples of energy that seemed even more powerful than the ancestral weapons from the protector clans. The air around it trembled. Dragonflight! Cheng Fengyan cried out, and used a secret technique. With a wave of her hand, the whip expanded as it moved through the air, growing several hundred meters in a single moment. It let out a dazzling azure light, which enveloped the snow-white sky. Suddenly, the thunderous roar of a dragon appeared. The glowing whip seemed to have become a dragon that was several hundred meters long. It possessed 2 horns and a snake-like body. There were no wings, but 4 legs extended from its belly. It flew through the air like it was riding the wind and clouds, charging toward Changyang Mingyue with the terrifying aura of a dragon. Changyang Mingyue and Cheng Jingyan fought on the edge of the atmosphere. Below them, the gathered experts from the 4 races and the army of the foreign world were embroiled in a great war. This time, Xiaojin did not protect anyone like before. Instead, he took on a receival expert from the foreign world all by himself. The expert had already reached late receival, but Xiaojin's strength had already increased to mid-receival after eating a violet cloud peach. Coupled with the fact that he was a metallic spirit, having been born from the metal of the world, he possessed a specific advantage in certain areas. Along with the 9 godly arts from Xiaoling, Xiaojin was able to maintain equal footing with the late receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints, even though he lacked battle experience. Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Gui Haidao each took on a receival expert from the foreign world, but they relied on the saint weapons in their hands to stand up to their opponents. Their personal strengths had not increased beyond peak Saint Emperor after all, so their opponents forced them to fight defensively. If it were not for the fact that they had once been Origin Realm expert and had gone through countless battles of life or death, they probably would not have lasted until now. The sea goddess kept 2 receival experts busy by herself. Although she still remained at receival, she had reached the very peak of late receival, only an inch away from returnance. At the same time, the sea goddess had lived for over 1,000,000 years. Even though she had remained in the form of a soul for most of that time, her soul had completely surpassed receival after 1,000,000 years of refinement, which was why she was able to hold her ground against 2 experts on the same level as her. Ada, Air, Asen and ACI had created a sword formation, keeping a single receival expert busy with their strength as peak Saint Emperors. The space where the sword formation lay had dulled. Only a brutally sharp sword chi could be sensed. Nothing could be seen inside. Even the senses of a returnance expert's soul was unable to penetrate the formation. Taita wielded a golden axe, as he fought against an origin realm expert from the foreign world as well. Although he only possessed strength at receival, he possessed the power to take on a returnance expert. Regular returnance experts would not be able to hold their ground against him. So the receival expert he fought was heavily injured after a single strike. The receival expert flew back and vomited blood. His body had almost been cleaved in two by a single stroke. Shock filled his face. Mysteries of War Mortality Breaker. Taita Beloef. He began to shine a brighter golden color as he swung his axe down a second time. The golden axe fell toward the receival expert with a devastating power. The foreign expert could not even dodge the attack. He was only able to place his huge sword above his head and attempt to parry the attack. With a boom, the sword of extraordinary quality was cleaved into two by Taita's axe. The axe on the other hand continued down without slowing at all. It struck the top of his head and chopped him in half, splitting his body between his eyes. His soul was wiped out. The first origin realm expert to fall in this battle had been cleaved in half by Taita in 2 strokes. The myriad armament formation that had been created by the 49 Saint Emperors continued to send out ancestral weapons to keep the remaining receival experts busy. The other ancestral weapons were used to massacre the foreign Saint Emperors, who endlessly poured out of the tunnel. The battle among Saint Emperors had begun. Their battles were extremely intense, and people died constantly. The Saint Emperors of the 4 races all created formations as they surrounded groups from the world of Forsaken Saints. The puppets of revived saint weapons took part in the battle as well. They fought at the very front, engaging in an intense massacre as they killed the foreign Saint Emperors. The puppets felt no pain or fear. They were machines. Even after suffering unimaginable injuries, they would keep on fighting until they were obliterated. After they were chopped in half, they would continue to raise their weapons and swing them mercilessly at their opponents. They would continue as long as their heads were still intact. After some time, the puppets began to send shivers down the foreign Saint Emperor's spines. No one on the battlefield, including the Saint Emperors of both worlds, would fight as desperately as these puppets. Once heavily injured, almost everyone would flee from the battle. There were very few people who were willing to lay down their lives. However, a lot of Saint Emperors still died. Kaya did not take a direct role in that battle. Instead, she ordered the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast to fight against a receival expert from the foreign world, and open the space where the soaring ants all thrived at the same time, allowed the ants to surge out. They were innumerable as they flooded every corner of the battlefield. These soaring ants were not powerful individuals. In fact, there was not a single one that had reached Class 9 aside from the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. Even the number of Class 8 soaring ants could be counted using 10 fingers. However, the soaring ants were naturally immune to all energy attacks. Coupled with their steel-like bodies and terrifying numbers, the ants had become the scariest fighters on the battlefield. Although they were not strong enough to threaten Origin Realm experts, Saint Emperors found them to be fatal. If a large swathe of them surged over, Saint Emperors would fall. Chapter 1533. Shangguan Mu'er enters the battle. The wind wildly whistled about, kicking up sand and dust and darkening the land. The sounds of battle constantly bounced across the sky, melding all together. Violet shockwaves of energy collided with one another in the form of terrifying storms, producing deep booms. The battle had just begun, but the battlefield was piled high with corpses. There were many from the 4 races, composed of a few saint rulers and saint kings. On the other hand, Saint Emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints had died, but the amount of fighters the world of Forsaken Saints lost was less than a tenth of the Tianyuan continent's experts. Even saint kings struggled to play a role in such an intense battle, let alone saint rulers. If the saint rulers and saint kings had not utilized the formations Feng Xiaotian had showed them, allowing them to attack and defend, probably even more would have died. However, the intense battlefield was disrupted by the appearance of the soaring ants. Miserable cries appeared everywhere, filled with utter agony. These cries came from the foreign saint emperors. Their bodies were covered with soaring ants. Their flesh and blood rapidly vanished, devoured by the ants. Not only did the ants eat the saint emperor's flesh, but even their bones could not avoid the fate of being devoured after all the flesh was gone. Chilling sounds were produced as the ants gnawed through them. Skeletons were picked clean by the dense clouds of soaring ants at unbelievable speeds before their bones were devoured. Even the saint emperor's souls could not avoid being eaten. The saint emperors possessed powerful essences of life, flesh, and blood. After devouring each saint emperor, ripples of energy would radiate from the soaring ants. Their strength was rapidly increasing from the saint emperor's flesh. All the saint emperors of the foreign world revealed terrified expressions when they faced the terrifying ants. The ants were extremely difficult to kill. The powerful sword qi and energy rays, which could create bottomless pits throughout the Tianyuan continent, or kill several thousand Class 7 magical beasts, were completely useless against the soaring ants. They were not even powerful enough to kill a Class 6 soaring ant. The ants were completely immune to energy attacks, and could pass through them without any obstructions. The ants could even ignore the powerful energy barriers and armor the saint emperors had condensed on themselves. They would just phase through the barriers and armor, and attack the saint emperor's body. The only way the saint emperors of the world of Forsaken Saints could deal with the ants was to kill them by using their sharp weapons. However, there were just far too many ants. They blanketed an entire region, forming a dense cloud and ranging into the hundreds of millions. It was impossible to kill them all through brute force. At the same time, the ants would strengthen after devouring a saint emperor, so after a short amount of time, several dozen peak Class 7 soaring ants broke through to the 8th class because of the saint emperors they devoured. However, the soaring ants were different from magical beasts. Magical beasts would possess intelligence at Class 5, but the soaring ants were vicious beasts from the divine realm. They would not gain intelligence even after they reached the 9th class. They only possessed certain instincts. Only the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast could make use of these instincts. So no matter how powerful the ants became, they would follow the orders of the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. And because of the special connection Kaya had with the divine beast, she could control them. The number of Saint King and Saint Emperor puppets rapidly decreased. As the battle dragged on, the power of the 4 races rapidly declined. But with the appearance of the soaring ants, no matter how fast the Tianyuan continent weakened, they were able to fight on equal ground against the experts of the foreign world. However, Saint Emperors constantly shot out of the tunnel, so the balance between the Tianyuan continent and the world of Forsaken Saints began to totter again. Even with the assistance of the soaring ants, the balance wasn't maintained for very long. There were just far too many Saint Emperors. The world of Forsaken Saints had given birth to over 40 Origin Realm experts, and people who had reached reciprocity. It was impossible for the people of the Tianyuan continent to imagine how many Saint Emperors there were. Unless Class 9 soaring ants appeared, anything Class 8 and below would not be able to endure attacks from Saint Emperors. The soaring ants only possessed an advantage in numbers. At the same time, the soaring ants required some time to devour the Saint Emperors. During that time, the Saint Emperor would desperately fight back, slaying several hundred or even thousand soaring ants. As a result, for every Saint Emperor devoured, the ants would lose several thousand or more. There were some Saint Emperors who decisively abandoned their bodies as the ants gnawed away at them. Their souls would flee into the tunnel, so they did not die completely. At this moment, a gentle, pleasant music slipped through the air. It sounded otherworldly and possessed a mysterious power. It suppressed all the booms that were created throughout the battlefield. It seemed to be the only sound in the world. The music contained an irresistible charm. It could pass through all obstructions and reach the ears of everyone on the battlefield. Members of the four races were not affected when they heard it, but the Saint Emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints had their concentration sucked away. At the same time, the eyes of the Saint Emperors became empty, having fallen unconscious. They had been completely caught off guard. Quick, strike as hard as you can. Kill them all. The Grand Elder of Mercenary City cried out. His presence erupted, and he stabbed out with lightning-like speed. Before a Saint Emperor could return to his senses, the Grand Elder's sword pierced his forehead and wiped out his soul. The other experts of the four races reacted as well, striking with lightning-like speed and killing the Saint Emperors, who had been stunned by the music as fast as they could. The armies of the foreign world suffered heavy casualties during this single wave of attacks. Ouyang Yongwen remained trapped within the disc and watched everything unfold, unable to do anything. Not only was his strength sealed by the disc, but even his body was immobilized. He was irritated. The only benefit was that no one outside was able to harm him, as long as he remained within the disc's light. Soul attack. This is a soul attack. How can this be possible? There's actually an expert who can use soul attacks here. The 9 receival experts of the foreign world all revealed drastically different expressions as they frantically yelled. Although people who could use soul attacks had appeared throughout the history of the world of Forsaken Saints, they were mythical existences. Across the countless years, the number of people that could use soul attacks could be counted with 10 fingers. It had been several dozen millennia since a person like that had appeared. But if they did appear, they would definitely become a big deal. This was because soul attacks were some of the most difficult attacks to block. They could even be described as unblockable. And to their shock, they discovered that the person playing the music possessed an extraordinary strength. The music was actually able to influence them, even though it did not specifically target them. If it did, they would definitely find it very difficult to remain focused. After all, no errors could be afforded during battle, or they would be doomed. Cheng Jingyan became stern as well. She gazed into the distance and saw Shangguan Mu'er playing her zither. She wanted to go up to stop her, but she could only save her own skin by blocking Changyang Mingyue's attacks. There was nothing she could do about Shangguan Mu'er. Quick, report to the Spirit King immediately. We've underestimated the strength of this world. We need reinforcements. Call the other 4 elders, Cheng Jingyan cried out. Her voice reached the tunnel and was clearly heard by many Saint Emperors. It's Elder Cheng's voice. The Saint Emperors who heard the voice all revealed slightly different expressions. Some of them immediately turned around and ran off as fast as they could. Cheng Jingyan seemed to feel uneasy, so she formed a hand seal and used a secret communication technique to personally give the Spirit King a battle report. Chapter 1534. Unkillable. The 7-colored heaven-devouring beast was no longer fist-sized. It had become a 10-meter-long soaring ant. It flickered with red, orange, and yellow lights, and was fighting a receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. The sounds of their battle constantly rang out, and was extraordinarily intense. The receival expert who was fighting the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast became more and more shocked. He had lived for several tens of thousand years, and had basically seen most of the magical beasts out there. Even if he had not seen them all, he had at least read about them in the ancient records in the Sacred Spirit Hall. However, he had never seen or heard of such a vicious beast. It was actually able to fight him to a standstill, a mid-receival expert, as a Saint Emperor who had not even reached the peak. Even the ancient records of the Sacred Spirit Hall possessed no information about a magical beast with such battle prowess. What surprised him the most was that he had already poured all his strength into fighting the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast, yet he felt like his opponent was still not using its full strength. As they fought, the intelligent eyes of the divine beast would glance at the nearby woman. Deafening booms violently materialized in outer space. The intensity of the battles in outer space had far exceeded those on the Tianyuan continent. Outer space was darkness. Only specks of starlight gave the battlefield some natural color. Azure and violet lights glowed extremely bright, filling the space around them with light. They constantly clashed with a dark light. The huge figures of maces were constantly conjured. They smashed through space and erupted with devastating might. They crushed and collapsed the space where they landed, creating terrifying cracks that were several thousand meters long and causing the space around them to constantly tremble. Jianchen Xiongzhong, Xiaoling and Gongximing fought in outer space. Their battles were extremely intense. They had obliterated the space around them and caused it to descend into pure darkness. Jianchen and Xiongzhong's battle was particularly ferocious, having reached a white-hot intensity. A huge white tiger appeared in outer space. It radiated with a tremendous pressure, as if the god of beasts had descended. It directly shot toward Gongximing with a condescending pressure. The white tiger was ethereal, completely condensed from energy, but seemed rather illusory. It was a direct result of Xiaoling's 9 godly arts. Gongximing was stern as he stood opposite of her. He felt a threat from the white tiger. It was far powerful than the threat he felt from Xiaoling. He did not reveal any complacency at all. He used his 10-meter-long spear to stab the white tiger. His spear was unbelievably fast. As it moved, the space near the tip of the spear immediately shattered like a mirror. However, Jianchen became heavily injured as well. His left shoulder had been struck by Xiongzhong's mace, which not only reduced his entire shoulder to a cloud of blood, but also shattered the left half of his body. His body became a bloody mess. Jianchen and Xiongzhong possessed roughly the same level of strength. Coupled with the fact that the two of them were fighting as hard as they could in an attempt to kill each other in the shortest amount of time possible, the two of them were severely injured. They both became even more injured, Xiongzhong in particular. The power of laws from the way of the sword wreaked havoc within him, causing severe injuries. It even harmed the essence of his life, causing him to show some weakness on his face. Jianchen constantly vomited blood. His face had become sheet white. However, his eyes still glowed bright, showing no weakness at all. He controlled the Ziying sword with his soul and attempted to stab Xiongzhong's forehead to end the battle. Is this Jianchen unkillable? His true strength is clearly weaker than mine, but he's still so lively even after taking so many heavy attacks. Xiongzhong swore inside. Even he had to admit that his endurance was not as great as Jianchen's endurance despite being a late returnance expert. Jianchen had become unkillable in Xiongzhong's eyes because his regenerative abilities were just far too powerful. At the same time, he seemed to possess an endless energy that never ran dry. Xiongzhong could not afford to test how much longer Jianchen could keep it up. Chapter 1535. Hopelessness. If this continues, I will definitely lose. A gleam of light flickered through Xiongzhong's eyes. He had to admit that he had underestimated Jianchen. In terms of strength, he was definitely stronger than Jianchen, but not by much. He could not utterly dominate Jianchen, and Jianchen's recovery abilities were just far too powerful. Under the dual healing from his abilities as a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master, and his chaotic body, Jianchen could recover in an extremely short amount of time, no matter how fatal his injuries were. He was even able to regrow whole limbs. On the other hand, Xiongzhong did not possess these abilities, and his wounds from the power of laws would not close up either. The more heavily injured he became, the more power he needed to devote to suppressing the power of laws. It severely limited the amount of strength he could use. Jianchen basically healed as he fought against Xiongzhong, so Xiongzhong would obviously begin to suffer more. Xiongzhong tilted his head in an attempt to dodge the Qing Sua sword, which had targeted his forehead. At the same time, the thought of retreat crossed his head. If he continued fighting like this, it was extremely likely that he would die here. However, at this moment, a gleam of light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. He used all the power his soul could offer, using the martial soul force that would only appear in people who were both Radiant Saint Masters and fighters. Immediately, a tremendous pressure permeated the surroundings. It did not target anyone's body or influence their soul. Xiongzhong never expected that Jianchen would possess martial soul force, which targeted the soul. Xiongzhong's strength at late returnance was completely useless against martial soul force. He was unable to stop it, and any forms of defenses were useless. All he could do was forcefully endure it with his powerful soul. The martial soul force caused a ripple in the surrounding space as it expanded as a wave, moving extremely quick. When it swept over Xiongzhong's body, he immediately trembled. At that moment, he felt like his soul was being assaulted by needles, causing an intense pain. He became dazed while his eyes became blank. Jian Chen's martial soul force was powerful. Martial soul force was known to be able to slaughter experts of the same level instantaneously. Even though Jian Chen possessed a soul at the level of returnance, his understanding regarding martial soul force was far too limited. Coupled with the fact that he did not know any secret techniques, he was unable to use the full power of his martial soul force. As a result, the martial soul force he used was unable to cause any substantial harm to Origin Realm experts. It could only influence them during crucial moments. As a result, Xiongzhong recovered in a single moment after being struck. His soul ached, but it had not been injured. However, that slight instant made Xiongzhong lose his chance to dodge the Qing Sua sword. Under the control of Jian Chen's soul, the Qing Sua sword sliced Xiongzhong's head with a resplendent glow. Blood immediately splattered into the surroundings with some white brain matter. A third of Xiongzhong's head had been cut away. His entire head instantly became dyed with blood. He looked vicious and terrifying. However, Xiongzhong did not die. The sword sliced away a third of his head, but it missed his soul, so he avoided disaster. You actually even know soul attacks. Xiongzhong involuntarily cried out. Jian Chen's talent had already shocked him. Yet Jian Chen actually possessed a terrifying soul attack. Xiongzhong's heart churned. Even though the soul attack was unable to harm Xiongzhong's soul, the soul attack had caused him to lose focus for a moment. Even if it was only a split second, it was enough time to make a comeback. Xiongzhong had already planned on fleeing, and now that Jian Chen had used his martial soul force, Xiongzhong became utterly terrified. Without any hesitation, he immediately abandoned Jian Chen and shot toward the tunnel below. Jian Chen was coated in a milky white light. He did not seem to lay off healing for even a single moment. He immediately pursued Xiongzhong. When he saw Xiongzhong attempt to flee, he tried everything he could to kill Xiongzhong. After all, he was a late returnance expert. In the entire world of Forsaken Saints, there were only 2 of them, so the death of one would be a great loss for the foreign world. However, some weakness appeared on Jian Chen's face. This was caused by the usage of his martial soul force, since he had severely drained the power of his soul. Even his head felt rather heavy. Even though Xiongzhong was heavily injured, he did not slow down at all. He charged back to the Tianyuan continent from outer space in a single moment. He fused with space, appearing outside Changyang Mingyue's domain as if he had teleported. He glanced back at the azure and violet lights, which were rapidly drawing closer to him. Clenching his teeth, he no longer suppressed the power of laws within him. He condensed all his power into his metal mace, and then struck the domain as hard as he could. Boom! With a great rumble, the tough domain loudly collapsed due to Xiongzhong's attack. Changyang Mingyue was connected to the domain, so she suffered a severe backlash and vomited blood when it was destroyed. Xiongzhong did not tarry. After vomiting some blood, he shot into the tunnel like a loose arrow, which had originally been covered by the domain. Jian Chen chased after him. When Xiongzhong was about to enter the tunnel, he suddenly froze and stared ahead. 4 figures gradually emerged from the tunnel. They were the 4 other returnance elders from the world of Forsaken Saints. Around another dozen receival experts followed behind them. At that moment, basically all the Origin Realm experts from the foreign world had come. There were only a few of them still stationed in the world of Forsaken Saints. Elder Xiong, how are you in such horrible shape? The 4 returnance experts were shocked when they discovered Xiongzhong. After all, Xiongzhong was not Qing Jingyan or Gong Shiming. He was a powerful expert only second to Ouyang Yangwen. They then saw Ouyang Yangwen trapped in the azure disk, and immediately revealed odd expressions. Was that not the supreme treasure that the Spirit King had bestowed on Ku Mu? so that he could trap the returnance expert of the other world? It was a treasure from their world of forsaken saints. So why had it been used against them, trapping their greatest elder, Ouyang Yangwen? I've underestimated the strength of this world. You must be careful of that person who's comprehended the way of the sword. I'll go heal first. Xiongzhong snorted. Even though he was in a horrible condition, bearing horrifying wounds, he was not happy with what he accomplished. He did not accept that he had been defeated by someone whose true strength had not even reached the origin realm. If that's the case, please take Elder Ouyang back with you so that the Spirit King can remove the treasure from him. Leave the rest of these matters to the four of us, a returnance elder said sternly. His gaze was fixated on Jianchen, who was coated by a milky white light. Jianchen did not continue his pursuit. Another 4 returnance experts had appeared from the world of forsaken saints, which caused his face to warp. Not only was he heavily injured right now, he had overused the power of his soul by casting martial soul force. His battle prowess had already taken a heavy hit. It would be rather tough for him to take on just a single mid-returnance expert. Now that 4 had appeared, coupled with more than 10 receival experts, how was the Tianyuan continent supposed to fend off such a powerful force? He's currently healing. His healing rate is extremely astonishing, so you can't afford to give him any time to catch his breath at all, Xiongzhong said through gritted teeth as he stared at Jianchen. He did not lose his battle against Jianchen because of the wounds left by the power of laws, but because of Jianchen's regeneration rate. If Jianchen had not been able to heal at such a shocking rate and have virtually unending energy, he believed that he would be able to kill Jianchen. 2 of the 4 returnance elders immediately went to take on Jianchen. The remaining 2 people charged toward Changyang Mingyue and Taita respectively. The rest of the receival experts began attacking the armies of the Tianyuan continent without any hesitation. Xiongzhong looked at Ouyang Yangwen. After a moment of hesitation, he waved his hand and froze the space there. He disappeared into the tunnel with Ouyang Yangwen and the azure disk. With the addition of 4 returnance experts and more than 10 receival experts, the balance, which was being maintained with great difficulty, was immediately destroyed. It began to snowball at that moment. The armies of the Tianyuan continent suffered heavy casualties, and many experts fell. Changyang Mingyue possessed the upper hand when she had fought against just Cheng Jingyan. But with the entry of a second returnance expert, the pressure she faced immediately increased by several fold. She was forced to retreat due to the combined attacks of the 2 returnance experts. Taita also fought an extraordinarily intense battle against a returnance expert. He just managed to gain the upper hand, but he was unable to end the battle in a short amount of time. Jianchen faced the combined attacks of 2 mid-returnance experts. If he was in peak condition, he might have been able to hold his ground, but now, it was difficult for him to keep a single mid-returnance expert busy. He was not the opponent of 2 mid-returnance experts with good teamwork. He fell into a disadvantageous position as soon as he began fighting. After clashing a few times, he was struck by a huge sword in the waist, almost cleaved in 2. Pleasant music lingered in the air. The zither melody was frantic and violet or gentle and calm. Shangguan Mu'er sat in the air, as she faced more than 10 receival experts, who had all gone her way. Her music possessed an irresistible charm. The influence of her music on their souls was so powerful that even the receival experts found it difficult to resist. They were all affected. However, the receival experts did not just sit and wait around. 5 receival experts immediately flew out, approaching her with weapons drawn. The experts of the world of forsaken saints placed particular attention on people skilled with soul attacks. They sent 5 people as a single wave to deal with her. A gleam of light flickered through Shangguan Mu'er's eyes. She played her zither even more frantically. The melody came out with a higher pitch. It possessed an illusion-like feeling, where ripples in space would form wherever the sound waves passed. A few of the receival experts immediately felt their heads lighten with the changes of the music. The influence from the zither melody on them had completely vanished. However, the 5 receival experts who had charged toward Shangguan Mu'er all displayed different expressions. At that moment, they felt like the charm within the music had become countless times more powerful than before. Their souls trembled violently as their consciousnesses blurred. They came to a halt. After around 5 seconds, the eyes of the 5 receival experts completely dulled and became empty. Shortly after that, the 5 of them turned around and sent a wild barrage of attacks toward their companions. Xiaoming, what are you doing? Are you betraying us? No, they are being controlled by the music. The receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints all cried out. Having run out of options, they could only send 5 more receival experts to keep their mesmerized companions busy, while 2 other receival experts shot toward Shangguan Mu'er. They wanted to stop her from playing the zither, so that they could save their companions. At the same time, Yang Lai Feng Xiaotian and Gui Haidao were covered in blood. They fell out of the sky while vomiting blood, falling into the mountains of corpses below. They did not climb up either. No one knew whether or not they were still alive. They did not belong to the origin realm after all. Even with the help of their saint weapons, they could only temporarily keep origin realm experts busy. They obviously could not remain their opponents after some time. Without the 3 of them, the 3 freed receival experts immediately targeted the group of saint emperors who were controlling the ancestral weapons. They consecutively struck out and knocked the weapons out of the sky. Most of the 49 saint emperors died, while those who survived suffered unimaginably brutal wounds. In that short moment, the Tianyuan continent had basically lost the strength equivalent to 10 receival experts. Chapter 1536. A cloud of blood. The experts of the Tianyuan continent were immediately forced to retreat due to the vicious attacks of the people from the world of Forsaken Saints. They suffered heavy casualties. The Saint Emperor and Saint King puppets were slain mercilessly by the receival experts of the foreign world. Basically all of them died. There were even some receival experts who attacked the soaring ants. Although they had become much stronger after devouring the flesh and blood of Saint Emperors, quite a few had reached the 8th class. They could only pose a threat to Saint Emperors. They lost all their advantages against Origin Realm experts. An Origin Realm expert extended his hand and used Origin energy to condense a hand that was 1,000 meters large. He reached out with it and caught a countless number of soaring ants. Tightening his hand, they were immediately crushed to pieces. The soaring ants had lost their advantages against Origin Realm experts. Being able to ignore all energy attacks was only useful against Saint Emperors. They could not withstand a single attack created from Origin energy. Their tough bodies became as fragile as paper when attacked by an Origin Realm expert. Shangguan Mu'er had used her music to control 5 receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. Under her control, they turned on their own companions, forcing the foreign experts to send another 5 receival experts to keep their companions busy. The 5 controlled experts remained mesmerized. 2 Origin Realm experts aggressively charged toward Shangguan Mu'er on opposite sides. They used their full strength as soon as they arrived near her, in an attempt to stop her from playing her zither. Shangguan Mu'er sat in the air while her eyes shone with a cold, enchanting light. She paid attention to the zither that lay on her knees, as if her entire mind had fused with it. She drifted back and avoided the attacks from the 2 receival experts. And at that moment, visible and realistic notes appeared as the heavenly enchantress continued to play her simple zither. Each note possessed terrifying power. Even receival experts needed to carefully face them. The notes surged toward the 2 receival experts who had attempted a pincer attack. They trembled violently before erupting with a thunderous noise. The 2 experts revealed different expressions as they stared at Shangguan Mu'er in shock. They became more serious. The 2 of them had originally believed that controlling 5 receival experts through music was Shangguan Mu'er's limit. They had not thought that she would actually possess the power to attack the 2 of them, while controlling their 5 companions. Just the notes required the 2 of them to use their full strength. They were unable to approach her at all. However, what they did not know was that when Shangguan Mu'er fended them off with the powerful notes, a sliver of clarity, and that merged into a struggle appeared in the eyes of the 5 mesmerized experts. However, it was soon drowned out by a hollow look once again. Shangguan Muer's skill with the zither had already reached an unbelievable level across the world of the Tianyuan continent. She stood at the very apex in terms of soul attacks, so there was no hopes for the receival experts to break free from her control. But clearly, Shangguan Muer's ability to control receival experts was still limited by her current strength. 5 was her absolute limit, and she could not afford continued disturbances, or her control would weaken. Suddenly a thunderous boom rang out. The formation created by Ada, Air, Asen and Aethai violently shook. A crack appeared on the perfect formation, and their 4 figures became vaguely visible in the blurry space that was formed by the crack. Afterward, a fist-sized ball of light shot through the crack with lightning-like speed. A transparent figure was slightly visible in the light. He flew toward the nearby tunnel in horror. He was a receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints, and had been reduced to a soul. The 4 brothers immediately pursued the fleeing soul. They radiated killing intent and sword chi. When they were about to catch up to the receival expert's soul, another receival expert blocked them. He stared at them with a dark expression and communicated using his soul. I never thought that 4 mere saint emperors would be able to injure my old friend. He's even lost his body. Probably even the Spirit King was not able to achieve something like this in the past. I, Ma Feng, would have once admired you because of this, but you've almost killed my old friend, so I can only take your lives as vengeance for destroying my friend's body. With that, a glaive just longer than 3 meters appeared in Ma Feng's hand. It radiated a terrifying presence. With a wave, the weapon immediately erupted with a powerful light, which flooded toward the 4 brothers. Formation. The 4 brothers were not moved at all. The 4 of them had made up their minds, and had planned to have plenty of bloody battles against many Origin Realm experts long ago. With Ada's command, the 4 brothers immediately created another formation with great teamwork. They had practiced the formation for a very long time, so they were extremely experienced at using it. Their movements were as smooth as flowing water, creating the formation in a single stroke. They blocked Ma Feng's attack. A gleam of light flashed through Ma Feng's eyes. His opinion of the 4 brothers changed once again. He swung his glaive, as he began fighting the 4 of them. With the domain of the ice goddess smashed by Xiongzhong, the experts from the foreign world all recovered their peak strength. Coupled with the fact that the continent was no longer protected by the domain, the endless number of terrifying energy ripples immediately caused large swathes of land to collapse. A bottomless pit had formed in a radius of 100,000 kilometers, as waves of heat surged up from time to time, due to the magma below. The Tianyuan continent was facing utter defeat. There were just far too many Origin Realm experts. There were even some personally fighting against Saint Emperors, making the Tianyuan continent suffer severe losses. Aside from Xiaoling, Taita, and Shangguan Muer Jianchun, Xiaojin, the sea goddess, and Changyang Mingyue had all been heavily injured. 3 of them were facing 2 or more opponents. The sea goddess was dealing with 3 of them all by herself. Jianchun and Changyang Mingyue took on 2 returnance experts each. One of the 4 reinforcing returnance experts had not begun fighting yet. He stared at Jianchun and Taita in interest. Once one of the other 4 elders, who Jianchun and Taita were fighting, retreated, he would immediately go assist them. But at this moment his face twitched. He suddenly gazed into the distance, and revealed an expression of surprise. At the same time, the Origin Realm experts who slaughtered the sainthood experts of the Tianyuan continent all stopped. They all gazed into the distance in the exact same direction. A cloud of blood had suddenly appeared on the distant horizon. It dyed the sky there a demonic red, and was rapidly expanding. It moved at an unbelievable speed, turning everything it passed red. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.